There is a place between waking and dreaming, somewhere in the last soft minutes before sleep pulls you under completely, where the mind is loose and quiet and especially open to stories. That is exactly where this is meant to reach you. So, wherever you are right now, let your body get heavy, let your shoulders drop, let the noise of the day begin to thin out and dissolve, because tonight we are going somewhere old and beautiful, and deeply, deeply strange. We are going to Lordran. Across the next few hours, we are going to move slowly through one of the most intricate and quietly devastating worlds ever built inside a video game. We are going to sit with the characters who live there, the wanderers and the mad scholars, the wolves and the firekeepers, the gods who built an age of light, and the serpents who whispered in the dark beneath it. We are going to uncover 135 facts about these characters, facts that the game only shows you sideways, through a detail on a piece of armor, or a dying line of dialogue, or a wolf who pauses before picking up a sword. None of this is going to be rushed. We move at the pace of sleep. You do not need to have played Dark Souls to follow any of this. The game itself was released in 2011, created by a small Japanese studio called From Software, under director Hidetaka Miyazaki, and it changed everything about how people thought interactive storytelling could work. But all you really need to know right now is that there is a world, and it is ending. And the people inside it are trying, mostly failing, and sometimes heartbreaking in their quiet determination to do the right thing anyway. Close your eyes if you like. Let these facts wash over you one by one. Section 1. The ones who wait at the edge of the world, facts 1 through 12. The first voices, the asylum, and what it means to begin again. The very first human voice you hear in all of Dark Souls does not belong to a mentor, or a god, or a sage. It belongs to a dying knight lying on the floor of a ruined cell, and the first thing he does is sacrifice himself so that you can have a chance. Fact 1. His name is Oscar of Astora, and he is never called by name within the main game itself. You have to find it in the description of his armor set, which he leaves behind after he dies. Oscar of Astora, Knight of the land of Astora, a place mentioned throughout the game but never visited, a country we only know through the things its people carried when they came to Lordran and never went home. Fact 2. Oscar is encountered twice. The first time, he is above you, looking down through the bars of a cell in the undead asylum, and he drops an Estus flask to you because he cannot reach the key. He sounds determined, almost cheerful, like someone who knows they are past the worst of it. The second time you find him, he is slumped against a wall, bitten open by a demon, clearly dying, and what he does with his remaining strength is tell you the legend of the bells, the prophecy that gives you a direction and a purpose, and then he asks you to hear his last request. His last request is for you to kill him before he hollows, before his mind goes blank and his eyes go yellow, and he becomes one of the mindless things that roam the corridors outside. Fact 3. You are not required to honor his request. You can walk away. If you do, or if enough time passes, Oscar hollows anyway, and you find him again later as a mindless, attacking enemy in the undead asylum when you return for an optional item. He carries the same shield he had when he was dying, but none of the man inside it. This is one of the gentlest and most terrible demonstrations of what hollowing means in this world. The body keeps going. The person is just gone. Fact 4. Oscar's armor set, the Elite Knight set, appears again in Dark Souls 3. It is found near the beginning of that game, placed near a grave as if in memorial, slightly corroded by the passage of an enormous amount of time. The implication across the series is that Oscar eventually became the chosen undead, rang the bells, completed the journey, and is only remembered by the object he left behind. There is no confirmation of this. From Software never confirms anything directly, but the placement feels deliberate. Fact 5. The undead asylum itself has a name that is worth sitting with. It is called an asylum, a place of sanctuary, but it functions as a prison, a place where undead humans are locked away from the world because the world does not know what to do with them. The hollow undead who roam its halls were, presumably, once people very much like Oscar, people who came with purpose and eroded away into nothing. The asylum is a snapshot of what happens to almost everyone. Oscar is the exception. He held on long enough to pass something forward. Fact 6. The giant crow that carries you away from the undead asylum at the beginning of the game and that you can return to throughout by curling up in a nest on a cliff behind Firelink Shrine, is believed by many scholars of the game's lore to be connected to a goddess named Velka, the goddess of sin. Velka is never seen. She is spoken of in item descriptions, referenced in covenants, implied in the structure of the game's sin and absolution system. Crows are her symbol. The crow that carries you may therefore be her servant, and the entire journey of the chosen undead might be set in motion not by destiny or prophecy, but by a goddess with her own reasons we never fully learn. Fact 7. The nest behind Firelink Shrine, the one where the giant crow lives, is full of items that have been collected and treasured. Mostly they are things with no obvious use. A branch, a ring, a strange stone. Other undead have left offerings there before you, hoping for something in return. The crow will trade certain items for others, an exchange that makes no logical sense until you remember that crows in Japanese mythology are messengers of the divine, creatures who carry things between realms. The crow is not simply an animal that collects shiny things. It is conducting transactions across a boundary you cannot see. Fact 8. There is an item in the game called the Pendant. During promotional material before the game's release, director Hidetaka Miyazaki hinted that the pendant had special significance, that players who chose it as their starting gift would benefit in ways that were not immediately obvious. Thousands of players pored over the pendant for months looking for hidden uses. Miyazaki eventually admitted, with what appears to be genuine amusement, that the pendant does nothing. It has no special function. He simply wanted to see how the community would respond to a mystery. The pendant remains in the game, an unremarkable item that nonetheless carries the weight of every hour someone spent trying to unlock its secrets. Fact 9. The Undead Asylum has a second, larger cell block that many players discover late or miss entirely. On a second visit, the area is slightly different. New enemies, slightly rearranged. The biggest change is the appearance of a stray demon, a massive version of the boss you fought on your first visit, occupying the main courtyard. What is interesting about the stray demon is not the fight itself, but the fact that its presence is never explained. Something came back to the asylum after you left. Something large. The game does not feel the need to explain why. Fact 10. There is a character described in item lore who appears to have been the warden of the Undead Asylum, or at least a figure of authority there. The peculiar doll, an item found in the asylum on a return visit, is said to have belonged to someone imprisoned there for a long time. Following the logic of the doll leads you to the painted world of Ariamis, a hidden area inside a painting in Anor Londo. This means that the very beginning of the game is quietly connected to one of its most secret and tender corners, a thread of story that starts in a prison cell and ends inside a work of art. Fact 11. The chosen undead, the character you play as, has no backstory, no name, no memory of who they were before. The game's prologue tells you only that you are undead and that you were imprisoned. Everything about who you were is deliberately absent. This is not a storytelling accident. Miyazaki has spoken in interviews about wanting the player character to be a vessel rather than a person, something you inhabit rather than observe. The lack of backstory is designed to make your journey feel like it actually belongs to you. You are not watching someone else's story. You are making the only one that exists. Fact 12. The fire at the very beginning of the game, the one that births the age of gods and humanity and sorcery and all the forces that shape Lordran, is called the First Flame. It is dying. Everything in Dark Souls, every crumbling ruin and hollow wanderer and desperate act of kingship or treachery, is a consequence of that dying light. You are not on a hero's journey through a world at its beginning. You are moving through a world at its end, trying to decide what, if anything, should come after. If you are still with me, you are doing something gentle for yourself tonight. Thank you for spending this time here. If this kind of long, slow journey through game lore is something you find meaningful, a subscription and a comment mean more than you know. Tell me which character you love most. Tell me which fact surprised you. And now, without stopping, let us keep going. Section 2. Firelink Shrine and the Gathering of Lost Souls. Bists 13 through 25. The hub at the heart of the world. Firelink Shrine is not much to look at. It is a collection of ruins arranged around a bonfire, open to a gray sky, sitting in the middle of a geography that seems to fold in on itself in ways that physics should not allow. Below it are the New Londo ruins. Above it is the undead parish. Behind it is a graveyard that leads down into the catacombs. All roads, eventually, pass through Firelink. What makes Firelink remarkable is not its architecture, but its inhabitants. Over the course of a full playthrough, more than a dozen different characters find their way here. Some come looking for something. Some come to rest. Some come because they have nowhere else to go. The shrine becomes a kind of commons, a gathering place for the broken and the wandering, which is perhaps the most honest description of what it is. Fact 13. The first person you meet at Firelink Shrine is a man sitting by the bonfire who has given up. He is called the Crestfallen Warrior, though this is a description rather than a name, and in the game's Japanese text, the nuance of his name carries the implication of someone who once had high hopes and has watched every one of them die. He is not cruel and he is not lazy. He is exhausted in a way that sits in the bones. When you arrive, still fresh and confused, he gives you the most useful information in the entire game without being asked. The 2 bells of awakening. Where they are, what you need to do. He tells you this with the tired generosity of someone who has told it to 100 people before you and watched every one of them fail. Fact 14. The Crestfallen Warrior is widely believed to have been the chosen undead before you, or someone who believed they were. The prophecy of the chosen undead was not written for a specific individual. It is a general description, a role that anyone undead and determined could attempt to fill. He was determined once. The evidence is in the quality of his armor, the Katarina-adjacent build of someone who once fought seriously, and in the fact that he knows the lore well enough to summarize it crisply. He just stopped believing that any of it mattered. Fact 15. When Kingseeker Frampt arrives at Firelink, the Crestfallen Warrior leaves. His dialogue immediately before departing references a horrible smell, suggesting that Frampt's presence drives him away physically. But there is a more layered reading. He says something about how legendary heroes keep popping up and making him feel inadequate. He might be leaving not because of the smell, but because he can no longer pretend to himself that he might still become what he was supposed to be. Watching you progress past him, watching Frampt anoint you as the chosen one, may be the final thing that breaks whatever was left of his resolve. Fact 16. You can find the Crestfallen Warrior again in the New Londo ruins, hollowed, hostile, wearing the same armor. He patrols the bridge near the entrance, right at the edge of the area that is most associated with the sin that flooded the city and drowned thousands of souls. Whether he went there seeking Darkstalker Kothi, whether he was trying to find a different path through the darkness, or whether he simply walked until he could not walk anymore and stopped there at the edge of the drowned world, the game does not say. It just puts him there and lets you understand what that means. Fact 17. Anastasia of Astora, the firekeeper imprisoned in a cage beneath the bonfire at Firelink, cannot speak. This is not a technical limitation. It is a story detail buried in item descriptions. The description of her clothing, the dingy set, contains the information that her tongue was cut out, and that her legs were broken and disabled, presumably to keep her from leaving. She was deliberately mutilated and imprisoned to serve as fuel for the bonfire. The firekeeper position, which appears throughout the series as a role of sacred service, has a dark underside here. The firekeepers are not volunteers. They are captives. Their pain and their presence are what keep the flames fed. Fact 18. There is a moment in Anastasia's story that many players miss entirely. In the introductory cinematic of the game, there is a brief sequence of images from across Lordran. Among them is a figure kneeling over a dying body in the graveyard at Firelink Shrine. That kneeling figure is Anastasia. She is tending to someone in the very graveyard that leads down to the catacombs, the same graveyard that is now full of hostile skeletons and empty of any human presence. There was a time, somewhere in the game's implied history, when Anastasia moved through that graveyard freely, when Firelink was something other than a ruin. The cutscene is so brief that you can miss it entirely, but it is the only glimpse we get of Anastasia doing anything other than sitting in a cage. Fact 19. Knight Lothric of Karim is one of the game's most discussed characters because his motivation is never made fully clear. You find him imprisoned in the undead parish, locked in a cell with no obvious explanation for how he got there. Freeing him or ignoring him both lead eventually to the same outcome. He kills Anastasia, takes her soul, and disappears. What is agreed upon is that he serves a goddess named Fina, whose covenant, the Way of the Dragon, relates to a power of love that manifests as a golden fog. What is not agreed upon is why he kills Anastasia specifically. The leading theory is that her soul, the compressed humanity of a firekeeper, is in some way valuable to his faith or his mission. The proof that he killed her, the most satisfying detail in this whole thread, is that when you hunt him down and kill him in Anor Londo, he still has her soul on his person. He never used it. He took it and then kept it. Nobody has ever fully explained what that means. Fact 20. Lothric drops the Ring of Favor and Protection when you defeat him, a ring that permanently increases your health, stamina, and carry weight, but shatters if you take it off. It is one of the best rings in the game. The item description says it was a ring given by the goddess Fina to her most beloved, and that her love, like the ring, is a thing that will destroy you if you try to remove it. This is one of Dark Souls' very quiet poems, a piece of game mechanics that also functions as a statement about the nature of certain kinds of devotion. Fact 21. Patris of Thoralund is the game's most quietly hateable villain, and the reason he is so effective is that he spends most of the game doing nothing visibly wrong. He stands in Firelink selling miracles, politely keeping his distance, giving you useful spiritual items. It is only through Lothric's gossip, through Oswald of Karim's pointed insinuations, and through the eventual appearance of the ivory talisman on his dead body, that you piece together what he did. He abandoned the Princess Rhea of Thoralund in the Tomb of the Giants. He left her there among the undead, among the dark and the bones, and then came back to Firelink alone and waited. When she eventually escapes and returns to the world, he tries to kill her quietly before she can tell anyone what he did. Fact 22. The ivory talisman that appears on Petrus's body after Rhea dies, Rhea's signature casting tool, is the clearest piece of evidence the game provides that he murdered her. If she had died naturally, accidentally, her talisman would not be on him. The game does not stage a confrontation. It does not put up a message saying, Petrus has committed a crime. It just puts an item in his inventory, an item that belongs to someone else, and trusts you to understand what that means. This is the game's storytelling philosophy in miniature. It respects your intelligence. It leaves the evidence and steps aside. Fact 23. Petrus was originally designed to have a more elaborate backstory, in which he himself needed to be rescued from necromancers in the catacombs before he appeared at Firelink Shrine. This content was cut during development. The excised quest would have given him a reason to know the catacombs well, and might have added layers to his decision to abandon Rhea there. Its removal makes him simultaneously less explicable and somehow more menacing. We have no idea why he made the choices he made. He just made them. Fact 24. Kingseeker Frampt's deep sleep inside the pool at Firelink Shrine is more interesting than it first appears. He can be heard snoring before he fully emerges, which means he has been there, submerged and sleeping, since some point before you ring the bells. He did not come in response to you. He was already there, waiting. This means that the Firelink Shrine, the supposedly neutral meeting place for wandering undead, has been occupied by a primordial serpent for an unknown period of time. Everything that happened at Firelink before you arrived, every wanderer who sat by that bonfire and tried to work out what to do next, happened with Frampt sleeping just below the surface of the water, patient, listening, dreaming whatever it is that ancient serpents dream. Fact 25. If you choose to side with Darkstalker Cathay instead of Frampt, and then speak to Frampt after that choice, he retreats beneath Firelink and does not return for the rest of that playthrough. His departure is instantaneous and complete. He simply goes. The line he delivers as he leaves, calling you a fool, not the chosen one, is petulant in a way that feels suddenly very human for an ancient cosmic serpent. Whatever Frampt is, whatever his real agenda might be, the thing that gets him in the end is wounded pride. He thought he had found his champion, and he was wrong, and he cannot bear to stay and watch. Section 3. The Undead Burg, the Parish, and the Ones Who Came Before You. Facts 26. Through 38. Knights and Merchants and the Ruins of Ordinary Life. The Undead Burg and Undead Parish are where most players spend their first dark hours in Lordran. They are the game's tutorial in the truest sense, not a handheld guided lesson, but a set of spaces where the world teaches you its rules by example. But they are also full of characters with stories that extend far beyond the moment you meet them. Fact 26. Solaire of Astora is the game's most beloved character, full stop. He stands on a bridge in the undead burg, watching the sun, and his entire posture radiates a warmth that nothing else in the game quite matches. He is happy to be there. He is genuinely, radiantly pleased to exist in this broken world, and he does not quite understand why that confuses people. His first greeting to you is to ask where you come from, and then, before you can answer, to express his joy at meeting another adventurer in the wide world. He introduces himself as a warrior of the sun from Astora, and asks if you might be interested in jolly cooperation, using that exact phrase, jolly cooperation, with the particular earnestness of someone who does not realize how unusual the phrase sounds in a world this dark. Fact 27. Solaire came to Lordran on a private mission that is entirely unrelated to the main prophecy. He is looking for what he calls his own sun, something that is uniquely and personally his, a source of light and purpose that belongs to him rather than being borrowed from a god or a covenant. This mission is the spine of his quest line, and where it ends depends entirely on whether or not you find the sunlight maggot in the Izalith tunnel before he does. The sunlight maggot is a parasite, a luminous creature that attaches to the head of its host and eats their mind. It glows. It looks from a certain angle like a tiny shining sun. And Solaire, who has spent the entire game searching for something that lights his way, finds it, puts it on, and loses himself to it. His sun was a parasite wearing the shape of his greatest longing. Fact 28. If you find the sunlight maggot before Solaire does, he does not get it. He sits in the tunnel beyond, disappointed, and tells you that he never found the sun he was looking for. This is the good ending. He survives. He is sorrowful but present, still himself, still the person who thought jolly cooperation was an adequate description of adventure. Whether it is truly better to deny him his dream is a question the game leaves with you, open and quiet, without a verdict. Fact 29. Solaire can be summoned for several boss fights throughout the game, which means that across the course of a playthrough, players can fight alongside him multiple times, building something that feels genuinely like a friendship forged in combat. He is encouraging in the fog gate before you enter. He is steady in the fight. He celebrates with you afterward. The mechanics of the summoning system here carry emotional weight that most games with explicit cutscene friendships never achieve, because you fought beside him. You did it together. The friendship is real in the way that matters. Fact 30. Solaire's armor set, the Iron Knight's armor, including his distinctive winged helm, was so iconic after the game's release that it became the series' most recognizable visual icon. The image of a player character doing the praise the sun gesture, arms raised in a wide V with palms forward, became one of the most reproduced images in gaming culture of the 2000s. From Software has continued to include references to Solaire and his Sun Covenant in every subsequent title in the series, which suggests that whatever the developers thought they were creating when they wrote him, what they actually created was something that people needed. Fact 31. Blacksmith Andre of Astora is one of the most consistently present characters in the entire Dark Souls lineage. He appears in the first game as a blacksmith working in a ruined chapel in the undead parish, gruff but helpful, willing to upgrade your weapons if you bring him the right materials. He appears in Dark Souls 3, apparently the same man, still at his anvil, having survived whatever happened to everything else. In Dark Souls 3, there is a quality to his presence that carries the weight of everything he has watched. He asks how you are doing with the manner of someone who has been asked how he is doing approximately 10,000 times and has learned that the polite answer is always fine. But here, how can I help you? The voice actor Sean Barrett plays Andre in both the first and third games, and also plays Ingward and Petrus in the first game, and Hodrick in the third. His range across these characters is quiet and extraordinary. Fact 32. Havel the Rock, the heavily armored enemy locked in a tower in the undead burg near the start of the game, is one of the game's persistent mysteries. He is wearing armor made of solid stone. He is wielding a club that is itself made of solid rock. He requires more punishment to defeat than almost anything you will encounter for the first several hours of the game, and defeating him is largely optional but rewarding. The mystery is why he is imprisoned. The tower he is locked in appears to have been sealed from the outside. Someone locked him up. The prevailing theory, supported by item descriptions from his armor and his shield, is that Havel was a great general under Gwyn who hated magic and particularly hated dragons, and that he was imprisoned by Gwyn himself, possibly because Seath the Scaleless, Gwyn's dragon ally, had him framed for a rebellion or made him appear dangerous. Havel Locked Away is a story about who holds power and about what happens to those who are inconvenient to the powerful. Fact 33. The crestfallen merchant in Sen's fortress is never named. He sits in a corner behind a set of bars, selling useful items at high prices, and he radiates the resigned energy of someone who has been in this specific location for an extremely long time and has given up wondering how long they will be here. He is voiced by Andy Gathergood, who also voices Laurentius of the Great Swamp, and the casting has a poignant irony. Laurentius is enthusiastic, warm, driven. The crestfallen merchant sounds like what Laurentius might sound like after several additional decades of Lordran. Fact 34. Siegmeyer of Katarina is first encountered outside the locked gates of Sen's fortress, sitting with his back against the wall, helmet on, apparently napping. His distinctive armor, the Katarina set, looks like a giant onion, a visual choice that the development team has confirmed is intentional but has never fully explained. Siegmeyer himself does not explain it. He treats the armor as perfectly normal, which is perhaps the most Siegmeyer thing about him. He has come to Lordran for adventure and glory. He has become stuck outside a locked gate and is patiently waiting for something to happen. When you open the gate, he thanks you with the generous enthusiasm of someone who is certain that great adventures lie just around every corner and then goes inside and immediately gets stuck again. Fact 35. Siegmeyer's questline across the game has the structure of a series of small rescues. You find him stuck. You help him through. He moves on, finds the next obstacle, and gets stuck again. Each encounter he gives you something as a thank you. A miracle, a ring, a shield. Each gift is smaller than the last, as if the game is trying to tell you something about what happens to a person who needs to be rescued too many times. By the time you reach the final encounter with Siegmeyer and Ash Lake, something has broken in him. He has given away so much and needed help so often that he no longer knows who he is without someone doing the difficult part for him. His ending, when it comes, is among the gentlest tragedies the game contains. Fact 36. The possible best ending for Siegmeyer, the one that most players agree feels like the kindest outcome, involves his daughter Sieglinde, who has followed him to Lordran from Katarina. Sieglinde is presented as practical and a little stern, the kind of person who followed her father across the world, not out of admiration for his quest, but out of the quiet certainty that he would need someone capable nearby. She finds him in Ash Lake, transformed or at the edge of transformation, and what happens between them is left to your imagination. The game cuts away. The lake is quiet. All that's left are two Katarina people who found each other at the edge of the world. Sieglinde later returns to Firelink Shrine and gives you a Titanite slab, as thanks for helping her family, the most valuable upgrade material in the game, as if she is paying a debt that she alone has the clarity to see clearly. Fact 37. Patches the Hyena appears in every From Software game from Demon's Souls forward, always in different forms but always recognizably himself. He is bald, slightly paunchy, and professionally dishonest. He will kick you into a pit if the opportunity arises. He will then come around, feel slightly bad about it, and try to do a little business with you. In Dark Souls, he is found in the Tomb of Giants, where he tricks you into climbing down a ladder into a pit full of undead while he handles a convenient lever nearby. When he subsequently encounters you again in Firelink, he offers you a modest gift as a peace offering, and then opens a shop, which is the most Patches resolution to a Patches situation that could possibly exist. The voice actor William Vanderpoy plays Patches in the Souls series across multiple games, and his performance has a particular quality, a combination of shamelessness and genuine warmth that makes Patches one of the most internally consistent characters across the franchise, despite his recurring memory loss about who you are. Fact 38. Laurentius of the Great Swamp is locked inside a barrel in the depths when you find him, and the first thing he does when you free him is express his relief by thanking you before his name. He is earnest about pyromancy in the way that only people who genuinely love their craft are earnest, talking about the flame as a living thing, something that grows and changes and rewards patience. His questline's tragic branch, the one where he goes hollow in Blighttown, is triggered by telling him where you got your upgraded pyromancy flame. If you tell him it came from Kalana, he goes looking for her, fails to find her, because Kalana only appears to those who have already advanced sufficiently in pyromancy, and hollows from the strain of a search he cannot complete. He is destroyed by his own ambition to learn, which is a specific flavor of tragedy that the game returns to again and again with its scholars and seekers. Section 4. Darkroot Garden and the Gravity of Lost Things, Facts 39 through 51, Nights, Forests, and the Weight of Loyalty. Darkroot Garden is one of the most quietly beautiful areas in the game, and one of the most lore-dense. It sits at the edge of Lordran, an ancient forest that has overgrown what was once a cultivated area, reclaiming the architecture of gods and knights under decades of green. The beings who live here, the ones who have not hollowed, are holding something in place. They are keeping vigil over things that most of the world has forgotten. Fact 39. Knight Artorias of the Abyss Walker is not in the main game of Dark Souls. He exists only in lore. His name is mentioned in item descriptions, his grave is guarded by a wolf, his armor tells a story of heroism and failure. The Artorias you fight as a boss encounter appears only in the DLC content, Artorias of the Abyss, which takes you backwards in time to the moment of his defeat. This means that most players who encounter Dark Souls engage with Artorias' story entirely through the objects he left behind, his greatsword, his shield, the armor of a knight who was willing to walk into a darkness from which nobody came back unchanged. Fact 40. The detail that made Artorias' story land differently for most players, the one that retroactively changed how they understood the wolf fight, is that when Artorias entered the Abyss and knew he was losing, he used his great shield not to protect himself, but to create a magical barrier around Seath. His shield arm was broken in the attempt. He spent his last act of control keeping his companions safe. The Seath you fight in Darkroot Garden is protecting Artorias' grave because that is the only task she has left, and she is using his sword, which she can barely carry, because it is the only piece of him she has. Fact 41. Seath's gender is never specified within the game itself. The English translation uses feminine pronouns in some fan communities, and the item descriptions are neutral, but the Japanese language original does not use gendered pronouns in the way English does, so the question is genuinely open. The community has largely settled on female for Seath, partly because of the wolf's appearance, and partly because the protective loyalty Seath shows feels, in the emotional vocabulary of the story, aligned with how the game presents its female figures. But this is interpretation, not canon. Seath is simply Seath. Fact 42. If you access the DLC content before completing the main game, you can travel to the past and rescue Seath from the magical barrier that Artorias created around her in the Chasm of the Abyss. If you rescue Seath in the past, and then return to the present and approach her in Darkroot Garden, the opening cutscene of the boss fight changes. Seath recognizes you. She whimpers. She reaches toward you. You reach toward her. And then she picks up the sword and the fight begins anyway. Because she must protect the grave. Because that is the task. Because whatever she feels about you is not sufficient reason to abandon the one thing she can still do for the person she has lost. The fight that follows, knowing what you know, is one of the most genuinely upsetting boss encounters in the series. Fact 43. Lord's Blade Kieran is one of Gwyn's 4 knights, an assassin who served the Lord of Sunlight as a bladed shadow, silent and precise. She can be summoned during the Artorias fight in the DLC, and she brings an unusual fighting style, dual golden blades, to the encounter. After the fight, she appears near Artorias' grave and asks you for his soul. She does not threaten you. She makes no demands. She simply asks, with a quiet dignity, for the soul of the man who was important to her. If you give it to her, she disappears. She sits down beside his grave and grieves, in whatever private way grief works for a shadow that has spent its existence killing things. If you do not give her the soul, she attacks you, and her golden blades make her remarkably dangerous. The choice the game is making here is between generosity and gain, as always. and it does not tell you which one is right. Fact 44. Alvina the cat is the leader of a covenant called the Forest Hunter, and she is voiced by Ev Karpf, whose voice has a quality that has been compared to Judi Dench, a certain crisp intelligence that makes you feel simultaneously assessed and found wanting. Alvina is ancient, apparently predating many of the structures in Darkroot Garden, and she speaks with the patience of someone who has been waiting for good company for a very long time, and is not particularly optimistic about finding it. She is also the only cat in the Souls series who leads a covenant, which is a distinction that feels very correct for cats specifically. Fact 45. Shiva of the East is a merchant who appears in Alvina's Forest Hunter covenant after you join, and who seems friendly and helpful and knowledgeable about the rare weapons he sells. He has a bodyguard who follows him everywhere and never speaks. If you follow Shiva to Blighttown, where he relocates later in the game, you can find him there and purchase additional items. What you cannot easily discover, unless you kill his bodyguard first, which turns Shiva hostile, is that Shiva was never entirely what he appeared to be. The bodyguard, an NPC called the Undead Mercenary, drops a katana called the Dark Wood Grain Ring when killed. Shiva wants this ring. His entire presence in the Forest Hunter Covenant is, according to lore speculation, an attempt to obtain it. He joined Alvina's group to gain access to a specific treasure in the forest, and was friendly to you only in service of that access. Fact 46. The Darkroot Garden itself was once a cultivated area, an outdoor garden maintained by the beings associated with the great sorcerer Seath the Scaleless, who used it as a kind of living laboratory. The butterflies you encounter there, the moonlight butterfly, is connected to Seath and also, through shared musical motifs, to Gwyndolin. Both figures draw their power from the moon. Both are solitary beings maintaining their presence in abandoned spaces. The butterfly is enormous and fragile, and does not attack in a straightforward way. It sits on a bridge and launches waves of magic from a distance, as if unwilling to commit to anything as direct as a fight. Fact 47. The stone knights who wander Darkroot Garden while wearing stone armor are believed to be former human guards who have been transformed or preserved by the garden's magic. Their aggression is triggered only when you enter certain areas, suggesting that they are guarding specific zones rather than simply patrolling. What they are guarding is never explicitly identified. The most common interpretation is that they are protecting what remains of the old cultivation, the living things that Seath's experiments produced, and that have continued to grow without his maintenance for however long the garden has been abandoned. Fact 48. The Hydra in Darkroot Basin, the multi-headed water dragon you can find below the garden, is connected to the golden crystal golem that stands nearby. Defeating the golem releases a character trapped inside it, the sorceress Dusk of Oolacile. Dusk is from a civilization that no longer exists, a place called Oolacile that was consumed by the darkness centuries before the game's events. She does not fully understand what has happened to her people. She is a living artifact from a destroyed world, like a book from a library that burned down. Speaking to her is how you gain access to the DLC content, and if you do not find her, or if she is killed, an entire questline disappears. She is one of the most fragile story threads in the game. Fact 49. Dusk of Oolacile, when she is first freed from the golem, kneels and thanks you in a formal register that belongs to a court that no longer exists. She thanks you the way someone from an ancient civilization thanks a rescuer, with the formal gravity of a world that had rules about such things. Then she asks where she is, and the game very gently does not answer her question in a satisfying way. She is in a forest. The civilization she comes from is gone. The people who would understand her courtesy are dust. She adjusts and offers you what she can. The sorceries of Oolacile, gentle golden spells that manipulate light and concealment rather than the aggressive blasts of Vinheim magic. Fact 50. The DLC boss Manus, Father of the Abyss, was originally a human. A primeval human, one of the first, a being who lived in Oolacile and had enormous latent darkness within him. The sorcerers of Oolacile disturbed his grave, attempting to use his power, and what they released was not the man, but the darkness made animate, the raw humanity within him running wild and destroying everything it touched. The abyss that consumed Oolacile was not a force from outside. It came from inside one of their own. This detail colors every discussion of humanity and hollowing in the main game. The darkness is not an external threat. It is what is already inside you when everything else is stripped away. Fact 51. Marvelous Chester is an NPC exclusive to the DLC content who appears in the past timeline of Oolacile and is wearing clothes from a much later period of history, including a top hat that belongs to no era of Lordran anyone can identify. He is cheerful, sells useful items, and has absolutely no explanation for why he is there or how he arrived. He appears to have been pulled back in time the same way the player character is, though the mechanism is different. His origin is never revealed. His cheerfulness in the face of a time-displaced, abyss-ravaged disaster zone is either evidence of exceptional resilience or evidence that he has been through enough unusual situations that this specific one does not particularly register. He is the game's quietest mystery, a man in a top hat in the wrong century, selling you throwing knives as if that is perfectly reasonable. Section 5. Anor Londo, the Illusion of Heaven, and the God Who Stayed, Facts 52 through 65. The empty city of light, Anor Londo, is where the game makes its most ambitious visual statement. After hours of ruined architecture and perpetual gray, you pass through a glowing gate and emerge onto a massive bridge bathed in orange sunlight, with towers rising ahead of you and a city of gods spread out below. Everything is golden, everything is enormous, everything is beautiful and impossibly clean. The effect is extraordinary, and then you start to notice that it is empty. The streets have no pedestrians, the palaces have no residents, the gods are gone. Fact 52. The sunlight over Anor Londo is an illusion. When you kill the figure known as Gwyn, Princess of Sunlight, who gives you the Lord Vessel in a warm, candlelit chamber and speaks with the gentle authority of a divine mother, she immediately dissolves. What she was a projection of light created and maintained by Gwendolyn, the last true deity remaining in Anor Londo. The sunlight vanishes the moment she dissolves. The sky turns to twilight. The city reveals its true state, which is the state of abandonment it has been in since the gods fled. The orange warmth you thought was sunlight was Gwendolyn holding everything together out of loyalty to a father who no longer exists. Fact 53. Gwendolyn is Gwyn's youngest child, born with an affinity for moon magic rather than sunlight, and Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight himself, found this so profoundly disappointing that he raised Gwendolyn as a daughter. The social codes of the gods treated the moon as feminine, and a sun god's child who drew power from the moon was in Gwyn's framework, not what a son should be. Gwendolyn was given feminine clothing and raised in that context, while remaining biologically male, a detail that Gwynevere gently acknowledges in her dialogue when she refers to Gwendolyn as her brother. Gwendolyn himself never addresses it directly. He simply exists in the role he was given, protects the city his father built, maintains the illusions that sustain its remaining purpose, and guards the tomb at its heart. Fact 54. The Dark Moon Seance Ring, found in the catacombs, reveals the hidden entrance to Gwendolyn's chamber in Anor Londo. When you equip the ring in front of the large statue of Gwyn near the bottom of the rotating staircase, the statue vanishes. It was an illusion. Behind it is a fog door, and behind that is Gwendolyn himself, long and pale, with snakes where his legs should be, standing in an infinite corridor that extends impossibly in every direction, a boss arena built from the logic of a dream. Fighting him is disorienting. The corridor stretches as you chase him, rooms appearing out of the architecture of nowhere. He is less a warrior than a thing that recedes from you, using space itself as a weapon. Fact 55. Gwendolyn's boss soundtrack is the same as the Moonlight Butterfly's boss soundtrack. Both are creatures associated with the moon, both attack from a distance, both are fundamentally fragile beings maintaining themselves at a remove from direct conflict. The shared music is the game's way of noting a connection that item descriptions also gesture toward. The Moonlight Butterfly is, in some sense, Gwendolyn's creature. Both of them are keeping vigil in different parts of a world that has mostly moved on. Fact 56. The Silver Knights who still patrol Anor Londo are there because they chose to stay. When Gwyn marched into the First Flame and the age turned, the gods left. Most of the knights went with them, or dispersed, or hollowed. The Silver Knights who remained did so, to guard the illusions Gwendolyn created, to protect the false princess and the false sun, and the false sense that the city of gods still functioned. They are loyal to a performance. They are defending the set pieces of a court that no longer convenes. Their dedication is touching and a little heartbreaking once you understand what they are actually doing. Fact 57. The Dark Moon Knightess, the Firekeeper of Anor Londo, wears full black knight armor and will attack you if you attack Guinevere or if you fight Gwyndolin while she is still alive. She is a servant of Gwyndolин's covenant, the Blades of the Dark Moon, and she takes that service seriously enough to become hostile the moment you commit heresy against the divine. If you kill her, her bonfire extinguishes. She is not optional for people who want access to her firekeeping services and do not want to commit the specific sin of eliminating Guinevere. She is one of the most precisely positioned pieces of consequence in the game, a figure whose presence makes your choices feel real. Fact 58. The giant blacksmith in Anor Londo is massive, ancient, and extraordinarily skilled, and he will under no circumstances explain where he came from or how he ended up forging weapons in the God City. He makes lightning weapons for you with the calm efficiency of someone who has been performing this service for a very long time and expects to continue for a very long time more. His drop upon death is the blacksmith giant hammer. Killing him is not recommended and causes no progress to any quest line. He is simply there, a professional of obscure origin, doing his job in a mostly empty city, apparently content. Fact 59. Domhnall of Xena is found in the depths on a first encounter, and then moves to a spot beneath Firelink Shrine after you ring both bells of awakening. He is an eccentric vendor who collects the equipment of defeated bosses and sells it back to adventurers. His first word to you is Siu Mei, which is an informal Welsh greeting. His name, Domhnall, is Gaelic and means world ruler. He wears a distinctive helm, carries himself with a slight self-satisfied quality, and has a habit of sharing information about the wider world in exchange for souls spent at his shop. He is one of those characters who exists slightly outside the drama of the prophecy and the bells and the kiln, watching it all with mild interest and making a modest living. Fact 60. Domhnall in New Game Plus will sell you the armor set of Gwyn himself, the armor that Lord Gwyn wore as the Lord of Cinder. It becomes available only after you have completed the game at least once, which means that on a second playthrough, you can wear the armor of the god whose fire you are perpetuating or whose cycle you are breaking. This is one of the series' characteristic gestures toward your own complicity. Here, wear what the god wore. Think about what that means. Fact 61. The painting guardians who wander Anor Londo are connected to the painted world of Ariamis, the hidden area inside a painting in the cathedral. They are humans who have dedicated themselves to the upkeep and protection of the painted world, and they are entirely hostile to anyone who enters the cathedral uninvited. Their weapons, short blades and curved swords, have a style associated with swiftness rather than power. They are the caretakers of a secret that is also a sanctuary. Fact 62. Crossbreed Priscilla, the creature who lives inside the painted world, is never given a clear origin in the main game, though the Guinevere lore guide suggests she may be Guinevere's child with an unknown partner. She is half human and half dragon, able to become invisible, capable of a life hunt scythe that drains vitality. She does not attack you when you enter her world. She asks you to leave. If you attempt to leave without fighting her, she will help you go. She only fights if you insist on it, if you corner her, if you refuse to let her have her exile in peace. Her last words, if you kill her, are some version of why. Not anger, not accusation, just that simple question. She was harming no one. She asks why this needed to happen. Fact 63. The voice actress Claire Corbett voices Guinevere, Priscilla, and, in Demon Souls, a character named Maiden Astria, another gentle being living in exile in a filthy, isolated place, acting as a guardian to the suffering around her. The casting is either deliberate or providential, because the quality Corbett brings to all three characters is the same, a warmth that is clearly genuine, a genuine and clearly costing something to sustain. Fact 64. Guinevere's real location, after she left Anor Londo, is described in item descriptions across the series. She married a god called Flan, the god of flame, and they apparently had children together, becoming something like a family of minor divinity after the age of Gwyn collapsed. Her ring, the Princess Guard Covenant ring, describes this afterward briefly, and without drama. She went away and built something smaller and less grand and perhaps more real. Of all Gwyn's children, she is the only one whose story continues without catastrophe. Even the story we see of her in Anor Londo is only an image, but the image is the most comforting thing in the game, and the knowledge that the real Guinevere is somewhere out there, alive and married and continuing, is quietly reassuring. Fact 65. Gwyndolin survives the events of Dark Souls. He has to survive, because in Dark Souls 3, he appears in the same location, consumed alive by a god called Aldrich, who uses him as a puppet during that game's boss encounter. Gwyndolin, who spent the entire first game maintaining illusions and guarding a tomb and trying to hold together the remnants of his father's legacy, ends his story being eaten slowly by a dreamer. The same voice actor, Harry Lister Smith, plays both Gwyndolin in Dark Souls and Prince Lothric in Dark Souls 3, two characters defined by a heavy burden of divine expectation and a fragility that makes that burden unbearable. Section 6. Blighttown, the Depths, and Those Who Found the Bottom. Fact 66 through 78. The Swamp and Its People. Blighttown is one of the most infamous areas in Dark Souls, a vertical descent through a rotting wooden structure above a poisonous swamp, full of toxic dart blowers and enormous diseased men, lit badly and navigated through constant fear of falling. It is also home to some of the game's most quietly important characters. Fact 66. Quelana of Izalith is the only one of the Witch of Izalith's daughters who escaped the disaster at Izalith intact. Her mother, one of the original lords who kindled the first flame, attempted to recreate the first flame herself and produce the Chaos Flame instead, a destructive force that consumed her and most of her children, transforming them into demons or horrors. Quelana alone retained her mind. She fled upward and has lived in Blighttown's swamp ever since, not in the toxic part, but on a raised platform in the cleaner section, visible only to those who have advanced sufficiently in the art of pyromancy. She exists in the game as both a teacher and a figure of profound survivor's guilt. She will ask you to end her mother's suffering. Killing the bed of chaos, the transformed remnant of the Witch of Izalith, is the only mercy she can offer to someone she could not save. Fact 67. Quelana's name and her sister's names follow a pattern. Quelana, Quelaag, Quelaan. The Witch of Izalith had 7 daughters, and these are the ones we encounter. The naming convention suggests a culture that named its children with deliberate similarity, a family of daughters who were meant to be understood as a unit. By the time the game begins, this unit has been shattered. Quelaag is dead or dying in her domain. Her nameless sister, who some fans call Quelan or the Fair Lady, is barely alive in a hidden chamber below. Quelana is in exile in a swamp. The others are demons. Fact 68. Quelaag, the boss you fight at the bottom of Blighttown, is a human woman fused from the waist down with an enormous spider of chaos flame. She has been running her domain, collecting humanity from followers, and sustaining her sister's fragile life with those offerings. The entire Chaos Servant Covenant exists as Quelaag's method of gathering the humanity her sister needs to survive. You kill her fighting your way to the second bell of awakening. You probably feel fine about it in the moment because she is attacking you. The feeling changes when you reach the hidden chamber behind an illusory wall in her domain and meet the person Quelaag was trying to keep alive. Fact 69. The Fair Lady, Quelaag's sister, is blind, near death, and covered in eggs that will never hatch. She is also the firekeeper of the bonfire in her chamber, which is why she is still alive. Firekeepers are sustained by their bonfire, and in turn sustain it. She became a firekeeper not by choice, but because it was the only thing that could keep her alive long enough to hope that Quelaag would return with more humanity. She cannot speak to you unless you wear the Old Witch's Ring, an item obtained by trading a peculiar doll to the giant crow. Without that ring, all she says is a series of question marks. With it, she speaks clearly and warmly, mistaking you for her sister, who is the only person she has heard from in so long that she assumes you must be her. She is so happy that Quelaag has come back. Fact 70. Ainji, the egg carrier who guards the passage to the Fair Lady, was originally a pyromancer from the Great Swamp who was cast out by his community because his pyromancies, specifically poison mist and toxic mist, were considered too perverse in their application, more suited to cruelty than combat. He came to Blighttown, contracted the egg infestation that afflicts so many of its inhabitants and was dying. The fair lady sucked the poison from his eggs, the blight puss that was killing him, and became ill from it, adding to her already precarious condition. He has devoted himself to her ever since. His loyalty is complete and unperformative. He never explains it or makes it into something larger than it is. He just serves her because she was kind to him once, and that is reason enough. Fact 71. The Eingai voice actor, Peter Marinker, also voices both Kingseeker Frampt and Darkstalker Kathi, the two primordial serpents who present contradictory visions of the game's destiny. This casting creates a subtle and disturbing unity among these three characters. The humble egg carrier in the swamp and the ancient cosmic manipulators beneath the earth share a voice. Whether this is thematic commentary or simply a small cast-making do, the effect is that Ingi carries something in his delivery that you recognize from more powerful places. Fact 72. Ingward is the last of 3 sorcerers who volunteered to stay behind in New Londo after the city was flooded to prevent the dark wraiths from spreading the abyss. He stands on a rooftop, in crimson robes, alone, offering a cure for curse status and guarding the key to the seal that holds the floodwaters back. The other 2 sorcerers are gone, presumably hollowed or simply gone. Ingward has been there long enough that their absence has become the landscape. He does not talk much about what it has been like. He does not say how long it has been. He offers the cure and tends the seal and does his job. After the 4 kings are defeated, he moves to Firelink Shrine, where he continues offering the curse cure from his usual careful distance. Fact 73. The cursed ghosts in New Londo, the enemies that walk through walls and ignore physical damage until you equip a cursed weapon or consume transient curses, are the spirits of the citizens of New Londo who drowned when Ingward and his companions flooded the city. They are trapped in a state of neither life nor death, unable to properly die because of the curse that afflicted them, unable to properly live because of the water. They roam through the architecture of a city that was destroyed to stop a much larger harm. They are collateral damage that never ended, still moving through the streets of the home that became their tomb. Fact 74. The 4 kings of New Londo were once human rulers who were given pieces of Lord Gwyn's soul as a reward for their service. This gift of divine power was also an infection. The darkness of the abyss, which Keathe and his dark wraiths were spreading through the city, found the kings susceptible because of what they had been given. Powerful humans are, in this game's logic, more vulnerable to the abyss than ordinary ones, because the thing that makes them powerful is also the thing that opens them to consumption. The 4 kings were destroyed by their own greatness being turned against them. Fact 75. Kirk, Knight of Thorns, invades you 3 separate times across the main game, in 3 different locations, each invasion coming at increasingly difficult moments. He is the only invading NPC who attacks you more than once. His armor, covered in backwards-pointing iron thorns, makes him one of the game's most visually distinctive figures. What makes Kirk interesting beyond the invasions is the armor description and an item found near the bonfire in the Chaos Servant area. His armor is found near Quelaag's domain. He was a Chaos Servant. His invasion of your world was not mindless aggression. He was gathering humanity to offer to the fair lady because her distress and her need for humanity is known, in some form, even among those who never enter her chamber. Kirk was hunting you to help someone he had never met. Fact 76. The Cragspider enemies in Lower Blighttown, the large fire-throwing spiders, are described in item lore as being associated with Chaos Flame in a way that connects them to the daughters of Izalith. They are not simple monsters. They are, in some fashion, more of the same family of chaos creatures that includes Quelaag and her sister, just further along the transformation that the Chaos Flame enforces on everything it touches. Fact 77. The female undead merchant, found in a sewer area of the Undead Burg, is the only merchant in the game who sings. Her song, a lullaby-like melody, accompanies your transactions and continues after you leave the area if you listen carefully. She also wears a distinctive lace-trimmed ensemble that is entirely incongruous with her location. She is living in a sewer in a ruined medieval city, and she has arranged herself with what seems like deliberate care, as if she is maintaining a standard of presentation that the world around her has entirely abandoned. This combination of singing and tidiness in the context of ruin makes her one of the game's small, persistent mysteries. Fact 78. Oswald of Karim, the sin-absolving cleric who appears on a ledge in the undead parish after the gargoyle fight, is the only person in the game with the power to remove the accumulated sins that make hostile NPCs attack you. He does this for a fee proportional to your soul level. His attitude towards sin is professional and non-judgmental, in the manner of someone who has heard every variety of transgression and stopped being surprised by any of it. He also carries a great deal of implied knowledge about the characters around him, making pointed remarks about Petrus's dubious character and suggesting that he is aware of things happening in Firelink Shrine that you have not yet discovered. He is the game's confessor, and a confessor who has paid attention for long enough to have a working theory of almost everyone. Section 7. The Duke's Archives, Crystal Caves, and the Madness of Perfect Knowledge. Facts 79 through 91. Scholars and what they become. The Duke's Archives are Seath the Scaleless' domain, a towering library filled with enchanted tomes and crystal caves and the imprisoned results of his experiments on living beings. Everything here is about knowledge and what happens to the people who pursue it without restraint. The NPCs in this area tend to arrive as scholars and leave as something else. Fact 79. Seath the Scaleless is not a god, is not human, and is one of the most tragic figures in Dark Souls lore for reasons that the game communicates almost entirely through item descriptions and environmental detail. He was born without the stone scales that made ancient dragons immortal. He was therefore mortal among immortals, always dying slowly while his kin remained unchanged. He betrayed the ancient dragons to Gwyn and received, as a reward, a dukedom and a fragment of Gwyn's soul. He also received a primordial crystal, a miraculous artifact that granted him the immortality his nature denied him. Everything Seath did after that, every experiment and every atrocity and every imprisoned scholar, was the work of someone trying to understand what he had obtained, trying to duplicate it, trying to extract from the universe the one thing it had originally chosen not to give him. Fact 80. Big Hat Logan arrived in Lordran from the Vinheim Dragon School with the specific goal of reaching the Duke's Archives. He had been searching for them for an unknown period of time. His nickname, Big Hat, comes from the enormous hat he always wore, which his own item description explains was a way of blocking out noise and the stares of strangers so he could think. Logan was intensely antisocial, a scholar who found other people intrusive, and the hat was his solution to the problem of existing in a world full of them. He wore it at all times. He wore it in Sen's fortress when you freed him from a cage, where he had been locked up by reasons unknown. He wore it in Firelink Shrine when he set up shop beside Griggs. He wore it in the archives when he was imprisoned a second time. He wore it when he went mad. When you eventually kill the mad, nearly naked Logan in Seath's arena, his hat drops as a loot item. It is the last piece of him. Fact 81. Logan went naked in his madness for a reason that the developers have confirmed. He was trying to emulate Seath, to become as close to Seath as a human body can become, to inhabit the subject of his fascination. The dragon is scaled and terrible and naked except for its own biology. Logan, stripped of clothing, wandering through the arena where Seath was first fought, casting the crystal sorceries he developed from Seath's own research, had become what he was studying. This is the purest version of a thing Dark Souls says repeatedly in different ways. The scholar does not observe the abyss. The scholar becomes it. Fact 82. Logan's tin crystallization catalyst, the staff he drops when you kill him in his mad state, has a name in the original Japanese that translates as Crystal Buddhist Staff. The Buddhist connection is not coincidental. Logan's veneration of Seath was not purely academic. It had the structure of religious devotion, a scholar who crossed the line from study to worship without noticing when it happened. His staff was his rosary. His madness was his consecration. Fact 83. Griggs of Vinheim, who you rescue from a locked room in the lower undead burg, is believed by community scholars to have been sent by the Vinheim Dragon School to observe Logan rather than simply to find him. The theory comes from examining his equipment, specifically the way his spells and tools suggest someone with a covert purpose rather than pure academic curiosity. If this is true, Griggs was a spy watching a legend, and when Logan's behavior became too extreme, too unsanctioned, Griggs was supposed to report back. Instead, he went looking for his master in Sen's fortress, hollowed in the attempt, and was found dead next to an outfit that included the Hush Sorcery, a spell designed to suppress the sound of footsteps, the kind of spell you carry when you do not want to be heard approaching something. Fact 84. The Pisaka enemies in the Duke's Archives prison tower, the tentacle-faced, crawling women who populate the cells near where Logan is held, are the result of Seath's experiments on human captives, specifically women brought to the archives and subjected to procedures that transform them beyond recognition. They are feral. They attack on sight. They make sounds that the game's audio design coded as distressed rather than simply predatory, as if the original person is still somewhere in the resulting creature, still reacting to what was done to them. Equipping the Cast Light sorcery, which is available in the archives, allows you to illuminate the darkness in the cells and see them more clearly, but seeing them more clearly is not easier. Fact 85. The Channeler enemy type, tall beings in wide robes who buff nearby enemies and cast damaging soul spears, are described in item lore as having been created or recruited by Seath for the purpose of gathering living specimens for his research. A channeler is what you become if you serve Seath's agenda long enough and closely enough. The channeler who appears in the undead parish and repeatedly interferes with the gargoyle fight by buffing enemies is not there by accident. He is an active operative of the archives, performing exactly the function he was designed for. Fact 86. Rhea of Thorolund, if you do not kill Petrus and do not take certain steps to protect her, ends her life as a hollow prisoner in the Duke's archives. A channeler abducts her from the undead parish, takes her to the prison tower, and she hollows in captivity. The same place where Big Hat Logan was imprisoned, the same tower full of Pisaka victims, becomes her final location. She is found as a hollow enemy, wearing the unique version of her maiden set, a version with no official item name or description, as if the game has acknowledged that the person it belonged to is no longer present. If you kill Petrus before this happens and do not exhaust her miracle inventory, she can avoid this fate entirely. She can simply exist in the undead parish, tending her altar, alive and functional and not tragically transformed. The effort required to protect her is smaller than most players realize. Fact 87. Hawkeye Goff is one of Gwyn's 4 knights and the most enormous human character in the game, a giant archer who has been sealed inside a tower in the DLC's Oolacile township area. His helmet, the Goff's helm, is listed as having been nailed shut, apparently to stop him from using his sight, which in his case was not merely good vision, but a form of precision that could hit targets at impossible range. He was sealed away rather than killed because he was too valuable and too loyal. He sits in his tower and carves wooden carvings since he can no longer use his bow, and when you free him and he can use it again, he shoots Calamite the dragon out of the sky with a single arrow. Across the language barrier of his imprisonment, Goff is one of the quietest, dignified figures in the game, a professional of enormous skill, sitting in a box in the dark, waiting for something useful to do. Fact 88. The Crystal Sage duo encountered in the game's area structure are never directly named in the first Dark Souls, but their lore connects them to Logan's legacy. The sorcerers who follow in Logan's tradition, who use copies of his staff and claim descent from his school, are described in later lore as one of the branches of scholarship that grew from his work. The Crystal Sages appear in Dark Souls 3 as bosses, inheritors of Logan's crystal sorcery tradition, still chasing the perfection that drove him mad. Fact 89. The White Dragon Breath sorcery that Logan drops when you kill him in his mad state is, in its item description, described as a sorcery that imitates Seath's own crystal breath. It is also described as incomplete. Logan spent his final phase of madness trying to replicate the most dangerous thing Seath could do and did not quite succeed before you ended his existence. He got close. He got closer than any other human sorcerer. But the final step of replicating a dragon's curse-laden crystalline breath in a human throat is a step that Logan's body, however willing his mind was, could not complete. Fact 90. The Archive's 3 bonfires correspond to 3 stages of imprisonment. The first bonfire, where you wake up after dying to Seath the first time, is a cell. The second, accessed after escaping, is the main library level. The third is deeper, past the crystal caves, near the entrance to Seath's true arena. Each bonfire represents further penetration into the truth of what Seath built here, a progression from captivity through scholarship to confrontation. The architecture is also the narrative arc. Fact 91. Logan's catalyst, the ordinary catalyst he carries before going mad, has been strengthened significantly beyond the standard model through years of continuous use. Its item description notes that a tool used with great skill and great frequency for a long enough time accumulates a quality that mere craftsmanship cannot produce. This is the game's way of saying that Logan was good enough, for long enough, that he changed the object he worked with. The catalyst absorbed some of him. The tragedy is that what the primordial crystal absorbed was the remainder. Section 8. The Painted World, Ash Lake, and the places that exist outside. Facts 92 through 104. Sanctuaries, secrets, and the edges of everything. Some of the game's most important characters live in its most hidden places, places that require specific items or specific knowledge to reach, areas that exist just outside the main current of the prophecy and the bells in the kiln. The Painted World of Ariamis is a sanctuary inside a painting. Ash Lake is the lowest point of the world, a primeval shore beneath everything. These are the places for the things that do not fit anywhere else. Fact 92. The Painted World of Ariamis is accessed through a painting in the Museum of Anor Londo that is only interactive if you are carrying the peculiar doll found in the Undead Asylum on a return visit. Without the doll, the painting is just a painting. With it, the game pulls you through into a snow-covered miniature world that appears to have been designed as a refuge for things that had nowhere else to go. Priscilla, the half-dragon, is there. The painting guardians are there. Items associated with a character named Velka, goddess of sin, are there. The place is a collection of exiles. Fact 93. The Ariamis painting was made by a painter named Ariamis. Everything in the painted world is therefore Ariamis's creation, a universe built within an artwork, inhabited by beings who were placed there, or who chose to enter it as a form of sanctuary. Priscilla, the half-dragon, presumably came there because the world outside had no safe place for her. The painting guardians chose to dedicate themselves to protecting this small enclosed world. The whole area is a meditation on what it means to make a home in a place that was designed as a place of refuge rather than a place of origin. Fact 94. There is an item in the painted world called the Blood Shield, and its description references a figure called Velka's Raven, who was a servant of the goddess of sin. The ravens in the game's imagery, including the giant crow who carries you to Lordran, are associated with Velka. This creates a quiet thread connecting the beginning of the game to its most hidden area. The crow that brought you here, the god of sin who moves through the world in feathered form, and the painted refuge where exiles live all connect through the same symbolic vocabulary of black wings and judgment and mercy. Fact 95. The dragon god encountered in the ancient boulders of the painted world is a faded remnant of an ancient dragon that was sealed inside the painting at some unknown point. Unlike the current enemies in the area, the dragon god does not attack actively. It sits in its own body like a monument to something that happened too long ago to matter anymore. You can kill it, and it drops scales and a unique soul, but there is no drama to the encounter. It is just the remains of a god that outlived its age. Fact 96. Ash Lake is reached through a hidden passage in the Great Hollow, a vast hollow tree that connects the Blighttown Swamp to the lowest level of Lordran. Very few players find it on a first playthrough. Reaching it requires dropping through the center of an enormous dead tree for several minutes, navigating branches and mushroom creatures until you emerge at the base of the tree and step out onto a shore. The shore is gray sand. The sky is twilight. Enormous arch trees, like the hollow you just descended, stretch into the distance. The lake itself is vast and still and has been there since the age before fire. This is the world before the age of fire existed. Fact 97. The Hydra in Ash Lake, a smaller one than the Darkroot Basin version, guards something in the water. Behind it, accessible only after the Hydra is defeated, is a single stone dragon, a creature of the ancient age who is still alive and standing there in the primordial shallows. You can join its covenant, the path of the dragon, by kneeling before it. The stone dragon does not acknowledge you with any warmth or particular interest. It simply allows the covenant. To be near it is to be near something that existed before Gwyn, before the first flame, before everything the game tells you about. It is immensely old, and it is entirely, profoundly unbothered. Fact 98. Siegmeyer of Katarina can be found in Ash Lake at the conclusion of his quest line, if that quest line takes its most bittersweet direction. He is sitting on the shore, his helmet off, looking at the ancient water. He is transformed to some degree by the chaos creatures he fought, in demon ruins, barely himself. His daughter Sieglinde is there with him. The conversation is brief. What you understand from it is that Sieglinde has found her father, that she knows what has happened to him, and that she is with him at the edge of the oldest place in the world. Whatever happens next, she is there. The two Katarina people, the father and the daughter, who cross the world to find him, are together in the quietest place in the game. Fact 99. The Great Hollow has no narrative purpose and no characters. It is simply a descent, a long and careful fall through a dead tree full of platforming challenges and ambushing enemies. What it does have is scale. The tree is enormous in a way that makes the player character feel extremely small, and the arch trees visible in Ash Lake make the hollow feel like a small twig by comparison. This is the game's way of recontextualizing everything you have been doing. You have been moving through the ruins of a civilization that was itself enormous, that existed within a world that is itself beyond comprehension. Fact 100. Gravelord Nido, one of the 4 Lord Soul-Bearers, is described in item lore as having been the first of all the dead, the first one to embrace death as a force in itself, and as maintaining a covenant around death that grants poisons and curses. He lives in a massive tomb at the end of the catacombs, and he is, when you fight him, surrounded by a pile of skeletons and bones that moves with him like a tide. He is not malicious. He is simply the embodiment of an inevitable process, death as a function of existence rather than an enemy. His covenant, the Gravelord's servant, involves placing signs in other players' worlds that curse them with stronger enemies, which is one of the most elegant pieces of mechanical storytelling in the series. To serve death is to make things harder for the living. That is the job. Fact 101. Vamos, the blacksmith, is in the catacombs, not because he went looking for skeletons, but because he ended up there through a process that he does not particularly want to discuss. He is undead, cheerful in the manner of someone who has made peace with his circumstances, and willing to upgrade weapons for you if you bring him the materials. He also offers a unique ability, the ability to ascend weapons along the fire and chaos paths, which requires the Chaos Flame Ember obtained deep in demon ruins. He is one of the game's professional pragmatists. The world is full of bones and dark. He is here. He has hammers. What else is there to say? Fact 102. Witch Beatrice, a sorceress who can be summoned for the Moonlight Butterfly fight and for the 4 Kings fight, is one of the few NPCs who enters your world voluntarily and without being tied to a quest line. She simply responds to your summoning sign if you know where to place them. Her item lore, found on the white set she drops if she appears as a dark phantom in certain circumstances, describes her as someone who wandered Lordran alone and died in the abyss. She chose to use her own death as a teaching moment, leaving behind her summon sign so that other warriors might have an easier time in the places where she fell. She gave her ghostly expertise to the fight she lost. Fact 103. The bonfire in the Tomb of the Giants, the one in the deepest, darkest area of the catacombs where there is no light source, and navigation is nearly blind without the skull lantern or cast light sorcery, is one of the hardest bonfires to reach in the game, guarded by enormous skeletal giants who can one-shot unprepared players. But once you reach it, it has a quality that no other bonfire quite matches. In the absolute dark, the flame is the only warm thing, and it is very warm. The contrast between the surrounding blackness and the small orange glow is one of the game's most effective pieces of environmental design, a pure demonstration of what the bonfire means, stripped of all the other visual noise. Fact 104. Blacksmith Rickert of Vinheim, found peering through a grate in New Londo ruins, is the game's most geographically inconvenient blacksmith. He is locked behind a gate that requires a master key or a different key to open. He cannot move, and he is surrounded by ghosts that will attack anyone who approaches. His shop selection is modest compared to Andre's, but he sells the repair box and offers upgrades along the magic path. He is also the only character who mentions that Big Hat Logan was once a royal member of the Vinheim Dragon School, confirming that Logan's background included more privilege and prestige than his disheveled presence in cages would suggest. Rickert is paying careful attention from behind his grate. Section 9. Covenants, Dark Paths, and the People Who Made Other Choices. Facts 105 through 118. The Roads Not Taken. Dark Souls has 8 covenants, 8 different communities with different philosophies about what the undead should do and what the world owes them. The characters who lead and inhabit these covenants often have the most complex motivations in the game because they have made a choice about how to move through Lordran rather than simply drifting through it. Fact 105. The Way of White is the game's most accessible covenant, led initially by Petrus and then effectively by Rhea, and it is associated with the most traditional religious framework in Lordran. The Way of White believes in the Age of Fire, in kindling bonfires, in the continued power of the gods. It is in many ways the most politically mainstream position in the game, and its 2 most prominent representatives are a man who murdered a princess and a princess who was murdered. The game is not subtle about what it thinks of mainstream religious institutions that serve their own interests before the people they claim to shepherd. Fact 106. The Warriors of Sunlight are Solaire's covenant, and they are the game's most wholesome organization. They believe in helping others. They believe in cooperative adventure. Their only goal is to accumulate sunlight medals, which are granted for defeating bosses while summoned in someone else's world, and to share those medals with the community. The Covenant is essentially a formalized system for being a good person in a dark world, and Solaire founded it or exemplifies it not because he was told to, but because kindness toward others is simply how he moves through existence. Fact 107. The Forest Hunter Covenant, led by Alvina, is devoted to protecting Darkroot Garden from invaders. Members who join it can be summoned automatically to defend the garden when other players enter without Covenant membership. This makes the Forest Hunter one of the most interesting covenants mechanically because it creates defenders who are specifically incentivized to protect a location rather than simply invade wherever they like. The garden becomes, for Forest Hunter members, a home worth defending. Alvina is their landlord, in a sense, except Alvina is an ancient cat of enormous magical authority and very specific opinions about who should be walking through her forest. Fact 108. The Chaos Servant Covenant, maintained by the Fair Lady, is entered by kneeling before her and offering humanity. At low ranks, it opens the shortcut between Demon Ruins and Lost Izalith, which is one of the most useful traversal unlocks in the game. At higher ranks, rank 2 requiring 30 humanity, it saves Solaire's life by ensuring that the red-eyed chaos bug in the Izalith tunnel, the one that infects and destroys him, is already dead. 30 humanity offerings is an enormous ask, but the reward is Solaire. The game asks you whether someone you care about is worth the specific and significant cost of caring. For a large portion of the community, the answer has always been yes. Fact 109. The Dark Wraith Covenant, led by Darkstalker Kaathi, is the Age of Dark Path made physical. Dark Wraiths are undead who have embraced the dark and use the Dark Hand, a weapon that drains humanity from living beings. They are the descendants, conceptually, of the 4 kings, who fell to the abyss partly because Kaathi gave them rings that allowed them to drain humanity from others. The Covenant asks you to become an instrument of the world-ending darkness that every other faction is trying to prevent. The people who join it are making a statement. They have decided that the Age of Fire is over and that prolonging it is dishonest. Fact 110. Oswald of Karim, the sin-cleansing cleric, belongs to no covenant, assists every covenant, and appears to hold some private philosophy about the nature of transgression that is never fully articulated. His item descriptions are among the most layered in the game. His prayer set talks about sin as a concept that Karim's theocracy treats with unusual sophistication, viewing it not as moral failure, but as a kind of debt that can be quantified and resolved. Oswald charges exactly the right amount for each absolution, enough to make it meaningful, not so much as to make it impossible. He is a professional of sin in the way that the best accountants are professionals of money. He likes the math of it. He is satisfied by a cleared ledger. Fact 111. The Blade of the Dark Moon Covenant, led by Gwendolyn, is an organization devoted to hunting those who commit sin. Its members are dispatched as blue phantoms to defend worlds where sin is being committed or where the world's owner is under invasion. Gwendolyn himself describes the Covenant's purpose in formal, archaic language that implies the organization has been running for a very long time. The Dark Moons are the gods' remaining enforcement arm, a justice system that functions even though the court that created it is empty. They answer to a god who is alone in a dark city, maintaining an institution because the institution is the only remaining evidence that there was once a world worth having rules in. Fact 112. The path of the Dragon Covenant, the one joined by kneeling before the stone dragon in Ash Lake, is associated with transforming the player character into something closer to a dragon. It grants dragon eye items and, at the highest ranks, rings and stones that alter your appearance. It is the most archaic covenant in the game, predating the Age of Fire, associated with a being that existed before the gods. Joining it is choosing an older allegiance than the current world has room for, which may be why the stone dragon seems so completely indifferent to the entire human drama unfolding far above its ancient shore. Fact 113. Shiva of the East's quest for the Dark Wood Grain Ring connects to the ring's extraordinary properties. The ring, when equipped, changes your roll animation to a ninja-style roll, faster and covering more ground than the standard dodge. Its item description says it belongs to a land east of Lordran, to a tradition of warriors that never appears directly in the game, but is gestured toward through Shiva's armor, his weapons, and his mission. Shiva is a representative of an entire culture that exists only in the margins of the main game's geography. A reminder that Lordran is a specific place and not the whole world. Fact 114. The Princess's Guard Covenant, entered by speaking to Guinevere, persists even after she dissolves. The covenant is technically maintained by Gwendolyn, who created the illusion. The irony is that by joining the Princess's Guard, swearing loyalty to the beloved Princess of Sunlight, you are in fact swearing loyalty to her lonely, exhausted brother, who is pretending to be her in order to find someone worthy to link the flame. The covenant's blessing is real. The figure who granted it is real in a different way than you were told. The loyalty you give is not misplaced, exactly. It is just given to the wrong face of the right cause. Fact 115. The Gravelord's Servant Covenant's mechanic, placing Gravelord signs in other players' worlds to curse them with stronger enemies, creates some of the most chaotic and memorable moments in Dark Souls multiplayer. Enemies that are normally manageable become significantly harder. Players who cannot find the sign and destroy it, breaking the curse, have to survive or flee. The Covenant frames this not as cruelty, but as service to Nito, to death itself, to the process by which the living are reminded that they are temporary. It is one of the rare game mechanics that has a clear ideological statement embedded in its function. Fact 116. Darkstalker. Kaathe's true goals are never fully confirmed. He presents himself as a corrective to Frampt's manipulation, as the one telling the truth about what the prophecy actually means, as the champion of the Age of Dark that he claims is humanity's natural inheritance. He is convincing. Some of what he says checks out against item descriptions and environmental evidence. But he also directly caused the flooding of New Londo and the destruction of the Four Kings by giving them the rings that allowed them to drain humanity, which suggests that his influence on the world's history is not exactly benign. He might be correct. He might be running the same manipulation as Frampt, but with a different goal. The game does not decide for you. Fact 117. Frampt is described in early promotional material as having waited in Firelink Shrine for someone to ring the bells for a very long time. He was not waiting for the specific person who actually rang them. He was waiting for anyone. Any undead determined enough to ring both bells would become, in Frampt's assessment, the Chosen One. The Chosen One is less a predestined individual than a role filled by whoever survives long enough to fill it. This is either encouraging in that the hero is anyone persistent enough, or unsettling in that the entire prophecy is a mechanism for producing a specific result rather than acknowledging a specific person. Fact 118. The Dark Sign, the mark on the undead that the prologue introduces as the curse of humanity's dark nature, is visible on the player character at the start of the game as a black branded ring. It is never removed. Even if you link the flame and perpetuate the Age of Fire, the dark sign is still there. Even if you choose the Age of Dark and extinguish the flame, the dark sign remains. The curse that makes you undead, that sends you to Lordran in the first place, is not resolved by either ending. It is simply the condition of being human in a world shaped by fire and dark. It is never going away. The endings of Dark Souls are not about removing the curse. They are about choosing what to do while you have it. Section 10. Gwyn, the First Flame, and the Weight of What Everything Becomes, Facts 119 through 135, Endings, Echoes, and the Long Quiet. After we are approaching the end of this journey, and it seems right that the final section should be about endings, about the god who made the choice that the entire game is asking you to revisit, about the characters whose stories continue beyond the screen, into Dark Souls 2 and 3, and Elden Ring, and the ongoing mythology that From Software has been building since 2011, and about the quiet things that linger. Fact 119. Gwyn, Lord of Cinder, is the game's final boss, and he is one of the saddest enemies in the entire series. He was the greatest king of the Age of Fire, a god of sunlight who led an alliance of lords against the ancient dragons and won, who shaped the world into something humans could inhabit, who gave fragments of his soul to chosen individuals as rewards for their service. He was magnificent. By the time you fight him, he is hollow. His soul is nearly spent. He has been sitting in the First Flame, burning himself as fuel to keep the Age of Fire from ending for an unknowable length of time. The kings fought by the chosen undead are not evil. It is just all he has left to do. Fact 120. Gwyn fought the chosen undead without his lightning. The lightning miracles associated with him throughout item descriptions are absent from his boss fight, replaced entirely by melee attacks. The leading explanation is that he gave his lightning away. His most powerful miracle, Sunlight Spear, is obtained by offering his soul to Frampt, and the description confirms that it is the miracle of Gwyn himself. He gave his signature power to his Sun Covenant, the Warriors of Sunlight, so that they could carry it forward even as he went to the flame. He walked into the fire with everything he had already given away. He fought you with nothing but his sword. Fact 121. Gwyn is highly susceptible to parrying. One of the most powerful armored god kings in the game's history can be parried and riposted just like a standard human enemy. This is either a mechanical oversight or, as many players prefer to believe, a deliberate statement. He is hollow. His reactions are hollow. The patterns of a real fighter are not fully present anymore. What responds to your attacks is the memory of how to fight, stored in a body that has been burning for centuries, not the consciousness of the god who once wielded lightning. You can parry him because there is nobody home. Fact 122. The music of Gwyn's boss fight, Gwyn Lord of Cinder, was composed by Motoi Sakuraba and features a solo piano. The rest of the game's boss music is orchestral, large and complex, and full of the sound of something important. Gwyn's theme is a solo piano, mournful, slow, almost gentle. It is the most intimate piece of music in the game, and it accompanies the most significant fight. The solitude of the piano is the solitude of the god who chose to do this alone, without being asked, sacrificing himself for a world that did not know it was happening. Whether that sacrifice was heroic or simply enormous and sad is something the music refuses to decide. Fact 123. The final two cutscenes of Dark Souls, the one for linking the flame and the one for walking away, are both about fire. In the first, you kindle the flame, and it rises enormous around you, a column of light against the dark. In the second, the flame gutters and fades and the dark comes in quietly, without drama. Neither scene tells you which is better. Both scenes are beautiful in different ways. The choice between them is the choice that the entire game has been building toward since Oscar dropped a flask through prison bars and a dying knight told you about bells. The game trusts you to make the choice, and it does not tell you if you were right. Fact 124. Sif's soul, when consumed to forge a weapon, can create the Great Shield of Artorias, which provides complete physical defense. This is the shield Artorias used to protect Sif in the Chasm of the Abyss. When you kill Sif, you take her soul, and from her soul you can make the thing that saved her. The weapon made from her sacrifice is her master's last act of protection. The game folds that gesture back into itself so quietly that many players never notice the connection. Fact 125. The Great Wood of Astora, referenced in the item descriptions of several characters including Solaire and Rhea, and the player character's possible starting equipment, is a land that exists entirely outside the playable area of the game. It is described through what its people carry and value. Astora seems to have been a place of chivalric culture, of knights and clerics and formal codes of conduct. Several of the most decent characters in the game come from there, The land itself never appears. Like so many important things in Dark Souls, Astora exists only in the objects and the memories of the people it sent into the world. Fact 126. The Nameless King, Gwyn's eldest son, was stripped of his name and his legacy for abandoning the gods and going to live among dragons. His name was literally removed from the historical record. When Dark Souls 3 allows you to fight him as a boss, you are fighting a god so thoroughly erased from official history that even his name is gone. His boss fight is magnificent and terrible, fought on a cloud platform above the world, with a lightning spear that he uses to execute a wyvern he has been riding. He is the god of war, stripped of his family, having chosen exile over obedience, living outside the story that was told about his father's age. He is one of the most powerful enemies in the series. He is also exactly what you would expect from Gwyn's son, who chose dragons over gods. Fact 127. Dark Souls 3 features a character called the Firekeeper, who levels you up and speaks to you in the hub area, and her voice actor is Martha McIntosh, who also voices Melina in Elden Ring. Both characters serve as guides and companions on the player's journey. Both make enormous personal sacrifices that are accepted without adequate thanks. The Firekeeper in Dark Souls 3 can be asked what she wishes for, and she says, after a long pause, that she would like to see the outside world, that she has always been in this dark and firelit place, and she wonders what the light looks like from somewhere that is not the flame. It is a small and devastating thing to wish for. Fact 128. Andre of Astora's recurring presence across 3 games, and his voice being performed consistently by Sean Barrett in the English version, creates a character who feels genuinely ancient in the way the lore claims he is. There is a theory, supported mostly by the devotion of the fanbase rather than explicit lore, that Andre is something other than simply old and undead, that he is perhaps connected to the undead parish church, to the divine forces of Astora in a way that makes him more permanent than other undead. He is there when you arrive. He will presumably be there after you leave. He is the constancy of craft in a world of constant dissolution. Fact 129. The male undead merchant, found in the early part of the undead burg, is perhaps the most optimistic businessman in the most pessimistic location imaginable. He sells shoddy equipment at reasonable prices, offers to buy your leftover junk, and has arranged his little merchant stall in a corridor full of hollow soldiers, with a neatness that speaks to a determined normalcy. He also, if you attack him, plays dead. He falls over and appears dead, and then gets up and attacks you if you get too close. He has been doing this presumably to many different undead adventurers for a long time, and the theatrical commitment to playing dead suggests someone who has found, in the ruins of a cursed city, a small and sustainable personality. Fact 130. The female undead merchant is located in a sewer beneath the undead burg and sells notably more useful things than her male counterpart, including the orange guidance soapstone, which allows you to leave orange messages on the ground for other players, and the purple moss clumps that Siegmeyer needs. She sings while she works, a tuneless but genuine humming that continues whether you are buying things or standing near her or have moved to another part of the sewer entirely. She also offers to buy your humanity, which she calls a lovely thing in a tone that is not entirely businesslike. What she wants with accumulated humanity is not explained. Fact 131. The game's original subtitle in Japan was Prepare to Die Edition, which was subsequently changed for Western audiences' initial marketing. But the phrase captured something genuine about the design philosophy. Death in Dark Souls is not a punishment, it is information. Every death tells you something about your enemy, your position, your approach, your equipment. The NPCs who talk about dancing and returning, about the bonfire as a place you return to rather than a place you rest at, are describing a worldview where failure is specifically useful. The crestfallen warrior does not say you will succeed. He says this is what you need to do. Whether you do it or not is up to the repetitions you're willing to make. Fact 132. Miyazaki has mentioned in interviews that the specific shape of the bonfire, the large fire kindled in a pile of swords and weapons, was chosen to represent both danger and warmth simultaneously. Swords are weapons. They are things that cause harm, but here they are stacked and burning, and the fire they make is the thing that lets you rest and recover and continue. The The bonfire is literally made of the instruments of harm repurposed into shelter. This is the game's core image, its central symbol, and it was arrived at through exactly the kind of thinking that made everything else in the game as layered as it is. Fact 133. The chosen undead's motivations for completing the journey are entirely self-assigned. The prophecy says that a chosen undead will ring the bells, gather the souls, and link the flame. But the prophecy does not say why that undead would want to. Oscar tells you about it. Frampt encourages you toward it. The whole architecture of the game is arranged to make it the natural path forward. But at no point does anyone explain to you what you personally stand to gain from burning yourself alive in the first flame. The player fills that gap. Some fill it with duty, some with hope, some with the simple desire to see what is at the end of the road. The game requires nothing more specific than your continued presence in it. Fact 134. The entire plot of Dark Souls 3 and much of Elden Ring is a consequence of what you do at the end of the first game. The Age of Fire was prolonged. The cycle kept turning. More undead were created and more were sacrificed, and the first flame grew weaker each cycle, despite everything anyone did to sustain it. The world you chose to sustain at the end of Dark Souls had a future, and that future was more of the same, turning ever more slowly, consuming ever more of what was left. The NPCs you met, the characters you saved or lost, were all part of a story that did not end when the credits rolled. They were the first chapter of something much longer, and much of what came later was already present in the quiet space between the lines they spoke to you. Fact 135. At the end of all of it, if there is one thing that the characters of Dark Souls have in common, it is that they kept going longer than anyone had reason to expect them to. The crestfallen warrior sat at his bonfire long past the point of hope. Solaire searched for a sun that might not exist. Sif guarded a grave with a sword she could barely lift. Andre hammered at his anvil with no particular expectation that the next undead through the door would be anything other than another temporary traveler. Anastasia sat in her cage and breathed. Quilana waited in a swamp and taught. Ingward stood on his rooftop in New Londo and kept the seal. Each of them persisted, in the specific form their persistence could take, in the specific corner of the ruined world where they had ended up, for no better reason than that this was where they were, and this was who they were, and stopping did not feel like an option. That is, perhaps, the most honest thing that Dark Souls has to say. Not that you will win, not that the fire will last, just that you will keep going, that in the space between bonfires, between one small flame and the next, you will find your way. You will be helped by strangers who have no reason to help you, and hindered by people who have no reason to hinder you, and occasionally you will look out at a landscape of absolute ruin and find it, against all logic, beautiful. You can let the bonfire go out now. You can let sleep find you wherever it has been waiting. Good night. Whatever hunts you, may it find only closed eyes and the long quiet of a well-earned rest. If you made it this far, whether you are still awake and absorbing every word, or whether you drifted off somewhere around Quilana's swamp and are hearing this now in the soft half-awareness of sleep, thank you. These stories matter because you are here for them. If you found something in these facts that moved you, or surprised you, or made you want to load up Lordran one more time, leave a comment below. I love reading what the community brings to these characters. And if you want more of this, more slow, deep dives into the worlds of games that deserved more attention than the world gave them, subscribing means more of this finds its way to you. Thank you for being here. Rest well, good hunter. End of script. Extended meditations, going deeper into the characters we love. What follows are extended reflections on the characters, their contexts, and the broader world they inhabit. Let these settle over you as the night deepens. On Oscar of Astora and the Gift of a Beginning, there is something worth sitting longer with in Oscar's particular position in the story. He is the first human voice you hear, yes, and his voice is tired in that specific way that people are tired when they are making a very significant effort to not sound tired. He drops the flask. He tells you the prophecy, he dies. The transaction is complete in under 2 minutes of real time, and yet the weight of it carries through the entire game. What Oscar was, before his moment in that cell above yours, was a person who came to Lordran with the same purpose you now carry. He came because someone told him about the bells, or because he found his way to the same prophecy through some other avenue. He spent time in Lordran before he ended up in that asylum again, before the demon got to him. How long did he travel? What did he see? The game gives you no answer, but the fact of his undead asylum imprisonment suggests that he had been in Lordran long enough, and been through enough, that something or someone decided he was a problem that needed to be contained. There is a version of this story in which Oscar is not a failed chosen undead, but a deliberate prisoner, someone who was locked away precisely because he was making progress. The chosen undead's journey threatens powers that prefer the current arrangement, and those powers have, at various points throughout the implied history of Lordran, arranged for inconvenient individuals to disappear. The hollow soldiers who guard the asylum may be former chosen undead, failed ones who did not receive an Oscar of their own to drop them a flask and remind them what they were doing. That reading changes the feeling of the beginning. You are not starting from zero. You are inheriting a struggle that others died carrying forward, from a man who managed to hold enough of himself together, long enough, to give you what he had left. Oscar's gift is not just the flask and the key. It is the story itself. He passes the narrative to you with what remains of his strength, and what you do with it is the whole of the game. On Firelink Shrine as a living space. The geography of Firelink Shrine is worth understanding as more than a hub area. It is a vertical space, which is unusual. Most hub areas in action games are flat and navigable, optimized for easy access to equipment and upgrades. Firelink is built on different levels, connected by ladders and an elevator, with the bonfire at the center, but the other characters arranged at various heights and depths around it. Anastasia is below the bonfire, in a cage beneath the main platform. Her position is literally underground, literally beneath the fire that she feeds. The structural metaphor is not subtle. She is the foundation of the warmth above her, hidden from view, serving a function that everyone benefits from, but nobody has to look at it directly. The crestfallen warrior is at fire level, on the main platform, in the first seat you can reach. He is the most available character in the shrine, the easiest to speak to, and his accessibility is part of his role. He is where you go when you do not know where to go. He is the answer to the first question, which is, what do I do next? His location ensures that the answer is always nearby. Petrus, when he arrives, takes a position on the stairs leading upward. He is physically elevated above the bonfire, above the crestfallen warrior, between you and the elevator that leads to the parish. His position on the stairs is spatially appropriate to his character. He is always presenting himself as someone helping you get to the next level, literally occupying the path between where you are and where you need to go, charging for passage. Frampt, when he emerges, takes over an entire section of the ruined chapel, his enormous head displacing the space around him. His physical presence is architecturally disruptive in a way that nothing else in the shrine is. He does not fit the space he inhabits. He forces everything else to accommodate him. The crestfallen warrior, who cannot tolerate the smell or the imposition, leaves. The shrine reorganizes itself around Frampt, the way institutions reorganize themselves around the most powerful interest that arrives. When all the quest lines are complete, when Rhea is saved, and Patches has set up shop, and Siegmeyer has moved on, and Solaire is wherever Solaire goes between encounters, Firelink can be the most populated place in Lordran. Everyone who made it this far is here. The place that was ruins and solitude, and a single cynical man at the start, becomes a community of sorts. People who found their way to the same fire and stayed near it because it was warm, and because the alternative was the cold dark of the rest of the world. That is what the Firelink Shrine is for. It is what all fires are for. On the Peculiar Doll and Hidden Connections, the Peculiar Doll is one of those items that the game places specifically and expects you to notice. It sits in a cell in the Undead Asylum on your return visit, which means that someone put it there after your first visit, or it was there all along and you missed it the first time. Either reading is possible, and neither one is comfortable. The doll is small and odd-looking, and its item description says it was the property of a young girl imprisoned in the Undead Asylum. A girl who drew comfort from it in a dark place and kept it close. Following the doll into the painted world reveals what the girl was drawing comfort from in that darkness. She was drawing comfort from the knowledge that somewhere there was a painted world, a small enclosed space where things that did not belong anywhere could exist anyway. She was in a prison, and she knew about a world inside a painting, and she kept a doll that would let her go there when the time came. The connection between the undead asylum and the painted world of Ariamis is also a connection between two different kinds of imprisonment. The asylum is a prison imposed from outside. The painted world is a sanctuary chosen from within. The girl with the peculiar doll had experienced the first and dreamed of the second, and the item she left behind is a bridge between them, available to any one patient and curious enough to go back and look in the right cell. What happened to the girl is not established. Whether she made it to Ariamis, or whether she hollowed in the asylum, or whether some other fate found her, is left unanswered. The doll is there. The painting is accessible to those who carry it. The connection is made. The rest belongs to whoever chooses to carry it forward. On Solaire and the sun he found. The question of Solaire's son deserves more time than we have given it. He is looking for something, and what he is looking for is specifically his. Not the sun that Gwyn represents. Not the sun that the Warriors of Sunlight Covenant aspires toward. His own sun. Something personal and unique to his experience. Something that belongs to him the way nothing borrowed can ever belong to you. This is not a small want. In a world where identity is constantly being eroded by the hollowing process, where personality and memory and purpose are all subject to the attrition of continued undead existence, wanting something that is specifically yours, something that cannot be taken by hollowing because it is not stored in memory or purpose, but in something deeper, is one of the most ambitious desires in the entire game. Solaire's quest is also a philosophical statement about the nature of meaning. He could accept the borrowed light of the Warriors of Sunlight Covenant, the corporate sun of the organization he founded. He helps others find it. He celebrates their victories as extensions of the light he loves. But he will not claim that shared light as his own sun, because he knows the difference between warmth borrowed and warmth that comes from inside you. The tragedy of what happens to him, if you do not intervene, is not simply that he loses his mind to a parasite. It is that the thing he was looking for turns out to be wearing the face of the thing that destroys him. The sunlight maggot glows. It is warm. It sits on your head and seems, from the outside, exactly like finding your own personal sun would seem. The fact that it is eating his mind while it glows is the game's harshest joke, delivered with a gentleness that makes it almost unbearable. He found his light. The light was the end of him. When you prevent this, when you kill the maggot in the tunnel before Solaire finds it, he does not get his sun. He is sad about it. He will not pretend to be happy about the absence of the thing he was looking for. But he remains himself, and he remains capable of the joy that made him extraordinary in the first place. The joy of being alive and moving through the world, and being occasionally, blessedly, in the company of someone worth fighting beside. He never found his sun. He kept his soul. The game leaves it to you to decide which mattered more. On Anastasia and the Economy of Pain, Firekeepers and Dark Souls are firekeepers not as a job description, but as a biological state. They carry something within them, a quantity of humanity accumulated and compressed, and this store of humanity feeds the bonfires they tend. They are, in the most direct sense, fuel. The warmth that you rest beside and restore yourself at is coming from them. Anastasia's legs were broken, the description says, to keep her from wandering. Her tongue was cut out, the same description implies, though the full implication is slightly ambiguous, for some earlier transgression or simply to ensure her silence. She has been made immobile and mute, confined below the bonfire, serving a function that the game's world has decided she exists to serve, whether or not she chose it. What is notable about Anastasia is the moment in the prologue where she appears in the graveyard. She is kneeling over someone. She is offering something, some form of care or comfort or presence. She is, in that moment, acting on her own impulse toward another person. She has not always been the silent firekeeper in the cage. There was a time when she could move through the world and respond to what she found there. When Lothric kills her, and you retrieve her soul and return it to her cage, she comes back. And she speaks. Her voice, released from silence when her soul is restored, carries a gentleness that suggests she was always there, behind the inability to speak, always paying attention. She says very little, but she says thank you with a quality that goes well past the function of the phrase. She is thanking you for giving her back the ability to say it. The game never punishes you for not saving her. You can play through the entire game without ever knowing her soul is recoverable. Anastasia's story is one of the optional threads, the ones you have to go looking for. But the looking is worth it, because what you find when you look is someone who was paying attention the whole time, who was always there, who simply needed someone to come and retrieve what had been taken. On the Dark Wraith and the question it asks, the Dark Wraith Covenant is the most morally complex choice in a game full of morally complex choices, because it does not ask you to believe something evil. It asks you to believe something genuinely arguable. The Age of Fire is dying. Prolonging it requires sacrifice. The Age of Dark may be, as Kathy argues, the natural state of a world where the first flame is spent, a world where humanity comes into its proper inheritance rather than continuing to serve as fuel for a light that was never theirs to begin with. Players who take the Dark Wraith path are not simply choosing evil over good. They are choosing one uncertain future over another uncertain future, both of which have been presented to them by entities with their own agendas. Frampt wants you to link the flame. Kaathi wants you to become a Dark Wraith and drain humanity from others in service of the dark. Both serpents want something from you. Both are using you toward an end that belongs to them, rather than to you personally. The question the Dark Wraith Covenant asks, underneath all the lore about the Age of Dark and humanity and primordial serpents, is whether you trust authority more than uncertainty. Linking the flame is the expected thing, the thing the prophecy says you will do. Kaath's offer is the thing nobody expects you to accept. The path that requires actively going against the grain of every narrative cue the game has sent you since the beginning. Choosing it is choosing to believe that the expected story might be wrong. Most players do not choose it. Most players link the flame, perpetuate the cycle, because that is what feels like completing the game. But a meaningful minority have always found something compelling in Kaath's argument, in the idea that the Age of Fire was built on suffering, and that ending it might not be a tragedy. That particular conversation has been running in the Dark Souls community for over a decade, and it has not resolved, which is perhaps the most honest measure of how well the game argued both sides. On Sieglinde of Katarina and the people who follow. Sieglinde is not discussed as often as her father, and there is something a little unfair about that, because Sieglinde is extraordinary in ways that are easy to miss. She is the person who crossed the world looking for her father, not because she believed in his quest or found his adventure romantic, but because she was the competent one, and she knew he would need help. She is found imprisoned in a golden crystal golem in the Duke's archives, which means that at some point between leaving Katarina and finding her father's path through Lordran, she was captured and transformed into a living jewel by the forces connected to Seath's research. Being turned into the center of a crystal golem is not a trivial thing. She was freed, emerged, and immediately got on with the business of finding Siegmeyer, because this was what she came here to do. When you meet her at various points across the game's later sections, tracking her father's increasingly erratic path, there is a quality in her dialogue of someone doing an extremely hard thing without making a production of it. She is not looking for acknowledgement. She is not performing grief or worry. She is just doing the work, the way that the most genuinely capable people always just do the work. And if you want to help, you can. And if you don't, she will manage without you. Her final act, giving you a Titanite slab as payment for helping her family, is not just generosity, it is a recognition of debt. She tracked down a debt, verified its details, and settled it at the going rate. Sieglinde is, in a world full of people driven mad by cosmic forces and hollowed by accumulated tragedy, a person who understood the transaction, completed the transaction, and meant what she said when she said thank you. On Gwyn's children and what heritage does to people, Gwyn had at least 4 children that we know of, and every one of them tells a different version of the same story about what it means to be born to an enormous expectation. The nameless king, the eldest, chose to abandon the pantheon and live among dragons, which in his father's framework was the worst heresy possible. He is absent from the first game, his name removed from the official record, and when he appears in the third game, he has become something magnificent and violent and completely his own. He did not take on his father's son. He found the ancient things before his father and embraced them. He is, of all Gwyn's children, the one who most aggressively chose himself. Guinevere, by contrast, built something gentle. She left with the god of flame and made a family in some quieter part of the world, giving up the Princess of Sunlight role that she had held in Anor Londo to become something more personal. The beloved princess became a person with a husband and children and presumably a hearth that was hers rather than borrowed from her father's legacy. She too chose herself, but she chose toward warmth and connection rather than toward ancient power. Gwyndolin, the youngest, chose fidelity. He stayed. He maintained the city. He created and sustained the illusions. He founded the Darkmoon Covenant and ran it, and remained in Anor Londo as the last true deity in residence, doing for his father's legacy what his father was no longer alive to do. He is the child who stayed home, who internalized the family obligation so completely that it became indistinguishable from his own identity. Whether this was love or compulsion or some combination that cannot be separated is one of the things Dark Souls most carefully refuses to decide. Filianori, Gwyn's other daughter, appears in the Ring City DLC and has been waiting for her father's return in a state of suspended animation for an astronomical amount of time, holding a shell to her chest, maintaining a protective reality around a ruined city by the simple act of not waking up. She is the most extreme version of filial devotion in the entire series, a god who has been sleeping in a waiting room for eons because her father told her to wait for him, and she is still waiting. When you wake her, everything changes, and the change is not comfortable. 4 children of a sun god, and not one of them got to be simply a person. The heritage shaped all of them, bent them all towards something the original architect intended, and what they each did with that pressure is 4 of the most interesting character studies in the series. On Kirk, Knight of Thorns, and Invisible Charity Kirk's story, told almost entirely through 3 invasions and an item found near a bonfire, is one of the game's cleanest examples of how it delivers emotional content through the mechanics of conflict. You meet Kirk as an enemy. He invades your world in inconvenient places and at inconvenient times, and his armor with its backwards pointing iron thorns makes him visually memorable as an aggressive spiked figure. There is no dialogue, there is no cutscene. He attacks and you repel him, or he kills you. But the armor description tells you that Kirk was a Chaos Servant. The Chaos Servant Covenant is the Fair Lady's Covenant, maintained by someone offering humanity to a blind, dying creature in a hidden chamber so that her pain is eased and her life extended. The armor found near her bonfire, in the area associated with her covenant, confirms the connection. Kirk was gathering humanity in the only way available to him. He was invading worlds, taking humanity from other undead, and bringing it to a creature he had never met whose suffering he somehow knew about and felt compelled to address. The thorns on his armor are functional. They hurt things that hit him. They are the armor of someone who expects to be hit, who has accepted that the work he has chosen makes him a target, who has equipped himself accordingly. He is not hunting you because he is cruel. He is hunting you because you have humanity and the Fair Lady needs it, and there are not a lot of other ways to get large quantities of humanity quickly. When you kill Kirk across his 3 invasions, you are, from the Fair Lady's perspective, removing one of her few active advocates from the world. She never knows. She is blind and confused, and she cannot hear the invasions that are happening elsewhere in Lordran on her behalf. She simply continues to hold on, breathing in the dark of her hidden chamber, while somewhere out in the broken world, a knight in a thorned suit is dying, trying to bring her what she needs. On the architecture of honesty in Dark Souls, one of the least remarked upon qualities of Dark Souls as a piece of storytelling is its refusal to make anyone completely knowable. Every character has a layer of ambiguity beneath their most readable surface, and the game consistently resists the temptation to resolve that ambiguity for you. Frampt seems helpful. Is he? He has his own agenda. He has been sleeping beneath Firelink for an unknown period of time, waiting for someone to manipulate toward a specific end. But the end he wants, the continuation of the Age of Fire, is not obviously wrong. It has kept the world functional for a very long time. His manipulation might be in service of something genuinely good. Keathi seems honest. Is he? He presents himself as the corrective truth to Frampt's manipulation, and some of what he says checks out. But he is also the one who gave the 4 kings of New Londo the rings that made them vulnerable to the Abyss, which is the single clearest piece of evidence that his influence on the world is not neutral. He manipulated the kings toward the Dark Wraiths, which caused the flooding of New Londo, which drowned thousands of souls. His truth-telling about Frampt does not negate his own history of using people. Petrus seems villainous. Is he? He abandoned Rhea and murdered her? Yes. But the game does not explain his motivation. Was he afraid? Was he acting under orders from Thorolund? Did he believe Rhea would be unable to fulfill her mission and was making a practical calculation that her family name was already lost? None of this excuses what he did, but the absence of explanation makes him less satisfying as a villain and more honest as a portrait of how people who do terrible things often do them for reasons that are small and human and not commensurate with the damage they cause. The refusal to explain the characters fully is the game's expression of a belief that real people are not fully explainable. They are legible in parts, opaque in others, and what we see of them is always conditioned by what they need to show us and what they are able to hide. Lordran is full of people like that, which is why it feels real in ways that more explicitly storified worlds often do not. A final word on the nature of the bonfire. The bonfire is the central image of Dark Souls because it captures the specific quality of hope that the game is interested in, which is not the hope that everything will be fine, but the hope that there is a next step. You die in Dark Souls constantly, especially at the beginning, especially when the game is most actively teaching you its rules. Each death returns you to the bonfire. The bonfire is where you started from, before you tried the thing that killed you. It is not a reward. It is a reset, a small safe point in a world that does not have many safe points. But the bonfire is also warm. It is also beautiful, in the specific way that fire is always beautiful, which is the way of something that can harm you, and yet draws you to it anyway. Sitting at a bonfire in Dark Souls, in the moment after you have been killed, and come back and gathered yourself and decided to try again, has a quality that very few games have managed to replicate. It is a rest, a breath, a moment of stillness before the difficulty resumes. Every NPC who comes to Firelink Shrine comes because of the bonfire, not because it is strategically located, not because it is architecturally interesting, because it is there and it is burning, and in a world where everything is falling apart and going dark, something that is still burning is worth sitting near. The characters of Dark Souls are trying to get warm. That is the simplest way to say what they are doing in this world, moving toward the light, resting near it when they can, going back out into the cold when they must. The ones who make it, the ones who stay themselves longest, are the ones who remember what they are moving toward and why. Solaire is warm. Siegmeyer is warm, underneath the confusion. Andre is warm. Even Oscar, dying in his cell, is warm enough in his last minutes to pass something forward. The cold always wins eventually. The fire will go out. The night of the hunt is the longest kind of night, but in the meantime, there is the bonfire. There is the next step forward. There is the possibility that this time, with what you have learned from the last attempt, you will get a little further before the darkness finds you again. That is enough. In Dark Souls, and in most other places where persistence matters, that is exactly enough. Sleep well. The bonfire stays lit for as long as you need it to. The deeper architecture, connections. Across the lore on the 3 primordial serpents and the shape of manipulation, there are not 2 primordial serpents in Dark Souls. There are 3 that we know of, with the possibility of others. Frampt, Keathe, and the voice of An Yi, who shares their actor. A detail that functions less as a production economy and more as a structural note in the game's music. The same voice that advises you from beneath Firelink and from the depths of the abyss also speaks to you from the corridor of a dying girl's chamber in the swamp. Whatever primordial serpents are, whatever their nature and their origin, they are present in more places than the 2 you are told about. Frampt is the face of the established order. He speaks with authority and warmth, and the assumption that you will do what you are directed to do. His vocabulary is paternalistic in a specific way, a way that communicates confidence that you are not equipped to make decisions for yourself, and that the path forward has already been determined by those wiser than you. He is not lying, exactly, but he is not offering you information. He is offering you instruction. Keathe is the face of the alternative. His presentation is more intimate, more conspiratorial, framing himself as the one who tells the truth that the official account suppresses. He too speaks with confidence, with the authority of someone who knows what you do not know and is choosing to share it. His vocabulary is liberatory where Frampt's is directive. He tells you that you have been deceived and offers to let you in on the real story. The thing that both serpents have in common, which is more interesting than their differences, is that both of them want something from you. Both of them need you to make a specific choice. Both of them have shaped events in Lordran's history in ways that serve their agenda, and neither of them is willing to simply tell you what they are, or where they come from, or what the Age of Dark would actually look like if it arrived. This parallel structure is the game's way of saying something about the nature of guidance in general. Every voice that tells you what to do has a reason for wanting you to do it. The question is whether their interest and your interest are sufficiently aligned that following their guidance is worth the compliance it requires. In Lordran, as in most places, that question does not have a clean answer. On item descriptions as literature. The item description as a storytelling medium is Dark Souls' most distinctive contribution to game narrative. In most games, item descriptions are functional. They tell you what the item does, how much it is worth, what it is made of. In Dark Souls, the item description is often a short piece of literature, 3 to 5 sentences that imply an entire history. The Ring of Fog, for instance, contains the information that it was created by a member of the Forest Hunter Covenant from the scales of a creature that no longer exists, and that the ring reduces the aggro radius of nearby enemies. 4 sentences. The functional effect is communicated in 1. The other 3 establish a covenant, a craftsperson, a creature, a lineage, and the passing of time. This is the compression of a novel into the space of a footnote. The Deep Ring, found in a later game, describes a god named Aldrich, who was revered by a church despite being a man who ate people, because his appetite was so consuming that people decided it must be divinely inspired. 3 sentences. In 3 sentences you have a church, a god, a man, a theological rationalization, and an implied criticism of institutions that will sanctify anything as long as it is powerful enough to be frightening. The item description as a form rewards rereading and accumulated knowledge in a way that most game text does not. The first time you read about the Ring of Favor and Protection, you learn what it does mechanically. The second time, after you understand Lothric and Fina and the nature of the covenant he served, the description becomes something else, a statement about the cost of belonging to something completely and the violence of trying to remove yourself from that belonging. The NPCs of Dark Souls carry these descriptions on their bodies. What they wear, what they carry, what they drop when they die, all of it has been written with the same care that the character dialogue has been written. Learning to read those descriptions is learning a second language, a way of listening to the game that runs beneath the explicit story, and it makes every character richer than they appear on the surface. On death as information in the NPC who taught you, Dark Souls changed the relationship between player death and narrative engagement in ways that have influenced dozens of subsequent games. In most games of its era, player death was a problem to be minimized, an interruption in the story that the design apologized for with checkpoints and save points and easy re-entry into failed sections. Dark Souls treated death as part of the experience, as something that was supposed to happen and was supposed to teach you something when it did. This philosophy is embodied in the NPCs through the way they respond to your repeated presence. The crestfallen warrior does not comment on the fact that you keep coming back to Firelink, having clearly been killed multiple times. He understands the nature of the journey. Andre does not ask why you are here again so soon. He knows. The NPCs of Lordran live in a world where the chosen undead dies and returns, and they have adjusted their understanding of you to account for that reality. Some of them reference it directly. Frampt, if you approach him at the wrong moment, comments on your repeated deaths with the tone of someone recalibrating their expectations. The Firekeeper, after you die and return, does not perform surprise. She simply tends to you. The bonfires are not checkpoints in the way that the word implies a failure state. They are waypoints in a journey that has no single correct speed and no single correct number of attempts. The NPC who most directly embodies this philosophy is the crestfallen warrior, again, who has been failing at this journey for long enough that he has given up on it, and who nonetheless provides genuinely useful information to every new arrival. He has turned his failure into education. He has taken what the deaths taught him, and he passes it along not because he is generous, but because the alternative is to have learned nothing from any of it, and that would be the worst outcome of all. On what Lordran looked like before everything in the present tense of Dark Souls is a ruin of something that existed before. The Undead Burg was a populated city. Anor Londo was the seat of active divine governance. Sen's fortress was a test, which implies there was once something worth testing for. The painted world of Ariamis was put in a painting, which implies someone thought it worth preserving. New Londo was a city, a real city, with rulers and citizens, and enough of a population that flooding it was a significant atrocity. The NPCs you meet are the survivors of a world that was, at some point, not like this. Quelana remembers the time before the bed of chaos. Ingward remembers New Londo before the flood. Domhnall comes from Xena, which still exists somewhere in the world beyond Lordran, a place of origin that was not consumed by the slow end of the Age of Fire. Andre has been at his anvil long enough that he presumably remembers when there were enough people coming through to justify having an anvil here. What that world looked like before the scourge of hollowing and the dying of the fire is something the game only gestures toward. The architecture in its best state suggests grandeur. The item descriptions suggest courts and covenants and orders with history. The lore of the War of the Ancients, in which Gwyn and Nito and the Witch of Izalith defeated the dragons, suggests an era of active divine governance so recent that some of the participants are still alive. The feeling of Lordran as a place is the feeling of a civilization that is old enough to have produced extraordinary things and to have then watched many of those things fall apart. The NPs who remain are the ones who have not fallen apart yet, or who have fallen apart in ways that still allow function. They are moving through the ruins of the thing they were part of, and the weight of what it was before makes the present feel heavier than it would if the past were simply absent. The last Firekeeper and what she knows. In Dark Souls 3, there is a Firekeeper in Firelink Shrine who levels you up and tends to the shrine, and speaks to you with a quality of attention that feels different from simply performing a function. She is blind, as Firekeepers often are in the series, her eyes sewn shut, but she sees things with her hands. She holds your hand when she levels you up. She feels the quality of what you carry, and makes her assessment through touch. She has been in Firelink Shrine for a very long time. It is the Firelink Shrine of the third game, the Shrine of Usurpation or the Shrine of Light, rebuilt from whatever remained after the cycles of Dark and Fire, but it is still Firelink. The bonfire is still there. The layout is still recognizable. She is its keeper, tending the flame, waiting for the Ashen One who will come and ring the bells and link the fire, or end the cycle, or do whatever the age requires. If you ask her what she wishes for, she says she wishes to see the outside world. She wants to know what it looks like, what it smells like, what the light is like when you are not looking at it through the medium of the bonfire. She has spent her existence in service of the fire, and she has never seen what the fire is for, what it illuminates, what the people who rest by it go back out into. This wish is one of the most poignant things in the entire series. She is the keeper of the thing that makes exploration possible for everyone else, and she has never explored. She tends the warmth that sends adventurers out into the cold, and she has never been cold. The outside world that she wonders about is the world that you are traversing every time you walk away from the bonfire. She is wishing for your experience, the thing you take for granted, the thing you are trying to survive. If you reach the ending where the Firekeeper guides the flame to a gentle extinguishing rather than a sudden snuffing, she walks out of Firelink with you. For the first time in the history of her existence in that shrine, she is outside. She asks if it is cold. She asks what the dark is like. She reaches out with the hands that have always assessed things through touch, and she touches the outside air, and she begins to learn what it is. Coda. What it means to have made this journey by the time a player finishes Dark Souls for the first time, assuming they engage with the characters and not just the combat, they have spent time with a collection of people who are doing their best in circumstances that are specifically designed to prevent bests from being enough. Lordran is a world where the best is never quite enough, where effort and dedication and genuine heroism are all insufficient to prevent the eventual triumph of the dark. The fire will go out. The cycle will turn. Another undead will come to Firelink someday and sit beside another crestfallen warrior and be told about the bells. And yet, the characters we have spent this time with are not defeated. They are shaped by the impossibility of their situation, bent by it, altered in ways that are sometimes tragic and sometimes beautiful, but they are not simply crushed. Solaire keeps smiling. Sieglinda keeps looking. Quelana keeps waiting in the swamp for someone who might be ready to hear what she has to teach. The Firekeepers tend their flames. Andre hits his anvil. The doll in the hunter's dream, in a different game, in the aftermath of a different kind of darkness, greets the hunter with genuine warmth every time they return. This is the resilience that the games keep returning to. Not the resilience of winning, not the resilience of defeat conquering triumph, the resilience of continuation, of taking the next step, of finding the next bonfire, of sitting beside the warmth for a moment before going back out into the dark. If you are still here, if you have been with me through all of these facts and all of these wandering thoughts about the people who carry them, then you have done something tonight that is not nothing. You have given your attention to a collection of characters who deserved it, who were made with enough care that they can still generate hours of careful conversation this many years after the game was first released. Rest now. Let the bonfire do its work. Let the dark that is coming come slowly, at its own pace, because it is not in a hurry, and neither are you. Tomorrow, if you want, you can go back to Lordran. The doors are always open. The characters are always in their places, waiting to be visited, ready to give you what they have. They are patient, all of them, in the way that things that have been waiting for a long time learn to be patient. They will be there when you return. Sleep well, good hunter. The fire holds. Thank you for watching. If these long, quiet explorations of game lore are something you want more of, a subscription and a like mean more than you can know. Leave me a comment with your favorite character, your favorite moment, the detail that first made you love this world. I read all of them, and they keep me making these. See you next time. One more thought on the names that were never given. Dark Souls is full of characters who do not have names, or whose names are withheld by the game as a deliberate act of withholding. The Crestfallen Warrior has no name. The female undead merchant has no name. The fair lady has no name, only an epithet given to her by her devoted servant. Anastasia of Astora has a name, but it takes deliberate searching to find it, buried in an item description rather than given in any dialogue. This naming strategy communicates something specific about status and visibility in the world of Lordran. The people who are named, who are given names that the game places in front of you without requiring you to search for them, are the people who have been recognized by the world's power structures. Solaire is named, Siegmeyer is named, Big Hat Logan is named, or at least nicknamed with the kind of specificity that functions as a name. They are people whose presence has been registered, whose significance has been acknowledged by someone with the authority to do the acknowledging. The unnamed characters are the ones who provide service, who wait in fixed positions, who tend to things without traveling or questing or acquiring the kind of identity that names confer. The female undead merchant provides goods. The fair lady provides humanity to a bonfire. Anastasia provides fuel for the fire. None of them travel. None of them make choices that generate the kind of narrative momentum that names commemorate. They are the support structure of the hero's journey, and the game's refusal to name them is an honest acknowledgement of how support structures are usually treated. But Dark Souls also clearly cares about them. The fair lady is given the most emotionally devastating sequence in the entire game. If you understand the full context of Quelaag's death and the nature of her sister's condition. Anastasia's story is one of mutilation and resilience and quiet gratitude. The female undead merchant sings in a sewer and faces the world with a tidiness that is more courageous than most of what the named characters manage. The game names the ones history notices and leaves nameless the ones history overlooks. And then it spends enormous care on the nameless ones. It is making a quiet argument about who matters, an argument that runs underneath the visible one about prophecy and fire and the fate of the age. The nameless ones matter. The game knows this. It trusts that you will learn it as you go.